Hey, YouTube fans and fans of U.S. politics. I just wanted to provide a little commentary and my opinions and fact checks on the debate between Cenk Uygur and Ben Shapiro that took place at Politicon 2017. Right off the bat, just want to say, look, people have mostly things in common in this country and in general, and a lot of these debates are staged for entertainment purposes. But it sort of gets out of control with U.S. media. People on the left, on the right, they're libertarian, they're this, they're that, and they're all against each other. And they sort of make you also think that your neighbor is, either super socialist or super racist or something like that, which is not necessarily the case. I just want to put that out there right away. But these are fun. So let's really try to be fair to both sides and see who makes the better arguments. All right, let's go ahead. Oops.
We were expecting 1,000 people. We have 3,000 people in this room. So thank you. And the good news for you is what we decided to do, because you're so fantastic, is that we have a comedy hour that was supposed to be a little bit later on. And instead of it being later, we're going to do it exactly when these guys are finished. We're going to do it in here. We have an incredible lineup, a comedy lineup that we're going to do. So stay in your seats when this is over. We're going to go right into that.
Just want to point out again, this is entertainment, right? But politics is serious business also. People, it's sort of an intersection. It affects people's lives. And often you can make political change in your community without having to sort of debate how the federal government works. You watching this, you can do a lot of good in your own community and on a local level, and your local representatives and those elections. For example, it doesn't even have to be the political process, but I just wanted to say that if you do want to make a difference, debating politics is like debating astronomy. It's cool, but it's fun, but you can't really change anything that way, just through debate.
Now, the other thing I wanted to tell you was, the first year that we did this, we had about a couple hundred people coming with a couple weeks left. But then we got this guy, Cenk, to debate Ann Coulter.
All right, so there's a lot of people, but I happen to hear so many boos of Cenk Uygur. Certainly people cheering, but there's way more people booing. Now, it could be that the microphone's just placed in an area that just happens to have a lot of Ben Shapiro fans or people that just don't like progressive politics. But just keep it in mind, this is the audience. Most likely, all things being equal, the audience is probably composed more of Ben Shapiro fans than Cenk Uygur. And this guy, look at his face. He's like, what do I do? Well, that's a little awkward.
So all of a sudden, we ended up getting about 3,000 people that first year. Then last year, we got this guy, Ben Shapiro.
All right, this time the boos are outweighed by the cheers of Ben Shapiro. All they've done so far is just mention their names. So when this happens, typically the crowd in debates is not going to suddenly change their mind because someone's argument was better than the other person's argument. Typically, people are just going to cheer the person that they came in with, that they like. And so if you're watching this online, keep that in mind, and you're going to have to discount the crowd factor to some extent if they're going to boo someone or cheer someone.
So we ended up last year we ended up with about 8,000 people coming to Politicon. So we thought this year, let's get these two guys together. They're both smart. They seem to have a bit of a following. And I think...
Yeah, they are, by the way, they are very smart. What I like about these guys, and I wish I also saw a Donald Trump debate versus Bernie Sanders debate. How many people in the country would have wanted that? I think people would have voted for Bernie in the primary just to see him debate Trump and vice versa. Too bad it didn't happen, although you can check out At Midnight with Chris Hardwick, and you can have Donald Trump versus Bernie Sanders. And it's going to be an awesome debate, the one that America deserves, but maybe not the one it needs right now. But we did have Bernie Sanders versus Ted Cruz, which a lot of people attended, and now this. So smart guys, let's go at it.
This year we have about 10,000 people at Politicon. So thank you for making this a big success. Your moderator Ben and Cenk are backstage. They've got their gloves on. They're ready to go. Your moderator, Stephen Olakara, he's going to come out now. He's the president of Millennial Action Project. Are you guys ready for this debate? Let's do it.
Yeah, let's do this. Are you guys
Stephen.
ready? If you're not, just pause the video.
Money laundering 101.
Really?
So you come across a suitcase.
All right, I guess my video has these ads in it.
Finish it up, crumple it.
You're
drag it
welcome,
to-
advertisers.
Stephen.
He messed that one up. A little bit.
Are you ready for debate night at Politicon 2017?
Woo-hoo.
All right. Well, let's bring them out, the people you've been waiting for. First, editor-in-chief of the Daily Wire and host of the Ben Shapiro Show, Ben Shapiro.
Look at the cheers started before. Okay, there we go. Ben, woo! With great power comes great responsibility. Some guy named Ben said that. USA.
All right.
I like it. He's modest.
All right. And founder and host of the Young Turks, Cenk Uygur.
Oh, listen to the boos. He was like expecting the same kind of response, but no. He's like, well, I wonder if he hears the boos, or it's a little more balanced than we hear in this video. You'll see. Throughout this video, he kind of makes reference to his show and how it's growing and how he has a following. Too bad a lot of that following is not in this audience.
All right.
All right. Let's see this happen.
If you guys could be a little more excited, that'd be great. All right. Well, we're here to debate the future of the political parties. And let me just say quickly one thing about the format. I'm going to pose questions to both of our speakers here. We'll have a response. We can have a re-response. We can go back and forth a few times. When we've gone far enough, then I will step in. I might ask a follow-up question, or I might switch the topic. So, are we ready to go, guys? All right, well, let's start with one of the topics in the news today, and that's healthcare. And I'm going to start with Ben.
By the way, this is happening basically 2 days after the healthcare bill failed to pass. John McCain, yeah, you're pretty much a deciding vote along with 2 other people. And I just want to say, that's pretty exciting, man. Healthcare, let's talk about it.
Are you proud or disappointed in establishment GOP figures like John McCain, Lisa Murkowski, and Susan Collins for their vote on healthcare?
So, I'm wildly disappointed with the entire party. The fact is that we were promised a full repeal of Obamacare. They did not even attempt to pursue a full repeal of Obamacare.
You know, to his credit, by the way, Ben Shapiro, even though he's on the right, is fairly critical, and he likes to support his principles rather than just play party politics, which I like. And I also like that about Cenk, which you'll see in the debate. They basically take jabs at their own parties, which I enjoy personally.
And the fact of the matter is that there's a significant gap inside the Republican Party about whether this should even happen or not. There are people who believe that the Obamacare regulations are an affirmative good. There was an attempt to basically leave all the Obamacare regulations in place and just remove the funding mechanism, which would have led to the exacerbation of the death spiral. The truth about healthcare is this. There are 3 qualities of healthcare. Just
a couple things, add context. American politics can be a little funny. Basically, some of the senators actually voted for the bill with the hope that they said they wanted the promise that the House will defeat it. So they basically said, I'll vote for the bill if I hope it doesn't pass in the House, which is kind of weird. They sort of have to answer to their constituents, many of whom are actually benefiting from receiving this health insurance. And once you receive something like that, 26 million people are now insured. They don't want to give it up. It's on some level it's unpopular. On another level, it goes against conservative ideology to have it. So they're kind of in a bind, and that's why you see a lot of trouble repealing it.
The truth about healthcare is this. There are three qualities of healthcare that you can have. You can have affordability, you can have universality, or you can have quality. And you can have two of those three things, but not all three.
This is a common thing when you go to a vendor and they say, look, you can have quality, you can have speed, or you could have it cheap, right? So you can pick two out of the three. It's a common thing. Many countries, though, actually do have all three. For example, Ben, Israel has all three. Israel has a mandate that you have to buy insurance from one of the four big insurance companies, and the people that can't afford to are subsidized by the government. And everyone gets health care, and it's pretty much up there with the United States, actually. Israel is well known for good medicine. How is that? Let's see, quality, universal access, check, okay. And what's the third one? Affordability. They can obviously afford it as a country, and people can afford it individually.
Right? You can have universality, affordability, or quality. Two of those two things you can have. And one of the things that's happened with Obamacare is that you've gotten closer to universality, but you haven't gotten any closer to either affordability or quality.
So what I thought U.S. was supposed to be the greatest quality healthcare in the world. So how much closer are we getting then? Is it like other countries are closer already and we're trying to catch up, or what?
And the Republican Party seems to be falling into the trap of basically just copying what the Democrats do, except being worse at it. What they actually need to do is relieve the regulatory burden.
Again, I like the fact that he digs at his own party, and you'll see Cenk doing that too. I think this is one of the best things about the debate. I like self-deprecating comments. I like comments where they agree with each other. I think that's very constructive in American dialogue, because a lot of what you see is just people attacking, and they get ratings. They're rewarded for this, okay? That's the incentive structure for the media. Just keep in mind, it's also toxic to the public discourse, which, what this country is based on, is founded on, right, is democratic discourse and ideas. And sometimes you have to admit that you agree with the other side.
Burden that is driving up the cost of healthcare, and they need to stop acting as though insurance companies' jobs is actually just to reimburse people for their bad health. If you join up with an insurance company and your health sucks to begin with, you're going to pay more because it's an insurance company, not a charity. That doesn't mean that we can't have... Now, that doesn't mean that we can't have some form of backup for people who have pre-existing conditions. I would hope that the social fabric would help fill that in. This is why I'm...
By the way, so he does want people not to fall through the cracks, right? So, but the thing is, then he sort of says this vague thing about charities.
Big believer in charity and churches and synagogues filling that gap. But what we can't do...
Just as an aside, before Medicare and Social Security were put in place, that's what we had, okay? We had, the Freemason lodges, or we had the churches and, people trying to help in all kinds of social ways. But it wasn't enough, because if it was enough, then the old folks would not be in poorhouses or dying on the street, some of them, before Social Security. So ask people if they want to repeal Social Security. There's sort of this thing where they don't really want to repeal these things, but it just ideologically rubs Americans the wrong way, because a lot of Americans really don't like socialism. And this smacks of socialism and wealth redistribution. But guess what? Every society has some degree of wealth redistribution. That's a mixed economy. There's some capitalism and there's some redistribution.
Is suggest, as the Bernie Sanders left does, that healthcare is an inalienable right, and therefore you can put a gun to my wife's head, she's a doctor, and you can force her to provide care at any cost you want to pay. You can't do that and hope to increase the supply of healthcare. Health insurance is not healthcare. They're not the same thing.
I agree.
And anybody who tells you differently is lying or trying to sell you something.
Well, actually, Dennis Prager, for example, has this video. What doesn't work about the VA, socialism? Prager University, right? If you look at this, Dennis Prager actually claims that the VA is single-payer, is an example of single-payer healthcare. It's not. It's government-run hospitals. Okay, it's hospitals for veterans, but it's government-run. Then he makes the claim that this shows that single-payer doesn't work. With the video, I'm going to invoke. People are going to talk about Medicare is single-payer. That's an example of single-payer. The government pays, but the providers compete with each other. Doctors compete, drug makers compete, medical equipment makers compete, hospitals compete. Right? They have to compete. But there were some rules that were set in 1985, the Korba Act Omnibus Act, which basically one of the things it did with Congress back then, it was a scandal that people were being turned away from hospitals, and they died on the route on the route to another hospital. Okay, they died on the way because it was an emergency, but they didn't have enough money to pay. So Congress passed a bill that basically said that you can't turn hospitals can't turn patients away for inability to pay during emergencies. Okay, so you treat the emergency, then you find out the person can pay. If they can't, guess what? The bill falls. It gets socialized. It falls on the society, right? So either way. And the Heritage Foundation is actually the think tank, the conservative think tank that basically said, look, individual responsibility, if you are free riding on the public with these emergency rooms and all these things, you should be paying yourself into some sort of, kitty or something. You got to pay to, and it was called actually the free rider fee. At that time it was considered a very, individual responsibility type thing and a Republican thing. But when it became sort of Obamacare, instead of Romneycare, it became the mandate, un-American slavery, and not the free rider fee anymore. So all of these things, are outgrowths of if you really want people to just be paid for by charity, then repeal the 1985 Omnibus Act, which basically was passed so people wouldn't die. Why don't you repeal that and just say, listen, if you don't have money for the emergency room, too bad for you. People don't want that. So again, you have this situation where the public doesn't really want this repeal. A lot of them don't want to lose the benefits, but they have to. So if it gets repealed, thankfully it didn't. You could see I'm kind of happy about that. But yeah, just an aside, single payer, an example of single payer is Medicare. Another example of single payer is pretty much any system that's like NHS in Britain that was just voted number one in a couple rankings, actually. And yeah, people talk about wait times. Look at U.S. wait times. They're a little worse.
Cenk, your take on the healthcare vote.
Great. Before I do that, first of all, welcome to the Thunderdome.
All right. I don't know what that means, but a lot of his fans cheered, and then other people like, what? And then some people booed anyway. So this time the boos and the cheers are kind of equal, which just kind of shows that he doesn't have a lot of fans stuffing this audience. They're booing his opening words.
All right. Let's hear it speak.
Guys, wait till he does something.
In all seriousness, the reason that I kid around about that is that I really want to make sure that Ben's opinions are heard and my opinions are heard, and that there's an exchange of ideas.
Thank you. I don't know how you can boo that, and I think everybody agrees with that. And I'd like to see more of that.
Believe it or not, there are some things that we do agree on, but we won't be discussing those tonight.
That was very important to say. Now, I'm not a huge Cenk Uygur fan or Ben Shapiro fan, although I think these guys are really smart. But I really appreciate all these debaters coming out and saying, if any debater comes out and says, look, we agree on so many things, okay, I want to make that clear. This guy is a smart guy. We agree on so many policies. So whatever we talk about today is, it's for entertainment. It's for actually disagreement. But remember, there's a lot of agreement too. That's very valuable for actual public discourse. So, props to Cenk for that.
So on the issue of healthcare, let's get going. So the Democratic Party is incredibly proud that they defeated a bill that had 17% approval rating. It's a low bar, and
I like his dig at the Democratic Party. Again, this guy's a progressive. He obviously wants single payer. He obviously wants some sort of public option or something. And he favors Bernie Sanders. But again, I like the fact that they're not afraid to call out their own party for being kind of political.
I'm glad they held. The Republicans have a comical position, which is that why didn't the Democrats help us defeat Obamacare? Well, that's kind of because that was their idea. And why in God's green earth would they help you defeat their own plan?
Yeah, okay.
Now, is Obamacare enough?
By the way Cenk talks, it's sort of like this simple way, right? He tries to everything is simple and colloquial, but I like that while he does that, he still makes sense. There's a lot of people who do this simple colloquial thing that you might have heard of, and they kind of go off the rails with logic. I like that he actually usually makes logical sense, and Ben Shapiro makes logical sense in this debate as well. which you would expect.
Not nearly. And there are a number of issues that we had as progressives with it, including lack of price controls. You left it in the hands of private insurance, and of course, them being corporations, which Ben kind of alluded to there, they're going to want to make money. And so that is very, very normal. And so I don't think that was the right way to approach it, and it was originally a Heritage Foundation plan to begin with.
Okay, a few things. When you hear price controls, what do you think? Now, if you are on the right, you probably think, ooh, big socialism government, yeah? And if you're on the right and on the left, you think, oh, great, yay, corporations are not going to jack up the price, yeah? So, and if you're a libertarian, then you're thinking, look, corporations are basically, an arm of the government. The whole thing is fascist, and the government's working with the corporations, and et cetera, et cetera. But anyway, like I said, it's a mixed economy. We all have to live together. And yeah, I mean, there are no good guys or bad guys in this. It's just systems that work better than other systems, and trying to figure out which ones work better, essentially.
So I believe that the right approach, and the one that Democrats should pursue next, although they probably won't, is Medicare-for-All.
There, by the way, have been a lot more cheers for this than boos. So this includes people who are not just Cenk's audience, which is interesting to me.
So real quick, let me explain why. Medicare polls at 77% and actually accomplishes the three things that Ben talked about. It's universal coverage, it is affordable, and actually gives you good insurance. That's why it polls at 77%.
Well, wait a second. So Cenk just addressed what Ben said, and he basically said you can get all three things, and Medicare does those three things. So let's see. Is it affordable? Well, it's affordable for the seniors, right? I mean, they use it. Is it universal? Well, all the seniors get it. One way to get Medicare for all, in fact, is to keep dropping the age gradually, not increasing, but dropping the minimum age until it finally covers everybody, right? And you can adjust slowly to the whole population. And let's see, quality. Is it affordable? Well, Medicare actually gets the cheapest prices. It puts the most pressure on doctors. Now, why is that? Why is single payer always getting lower prices around the world than I guess people competing? Because what happens is when grandmas, let's say, didn't have Medicare, they would compete as to who could pay more for the same service. Ooh, I'll pay more, so please treat me first, right? Or give me that service rather than the other grandma, right? What happens is when consumers compete, they compete on one thing, which is who can pay more. They don't compete on who can give piano lessons to your daughter, or if you do my knee surgery, I will mow your lawn. No, they raise the price, right? They defect from the price, and they say, okay, I'll pay more. I really need this, right? And if you're a provider, if you have a business, a service business, you can know, okay, once you have enough customers, you can raise your price, and the next customer that comes, you don't really need them, right? Because you already have enough, so they'll take it or leave it. And eventually, everybody sort of raises their price this way. Single payer is essentially the same thing as monopoly, but in reverse. When you have a monopoly, then there's one, or a cartel, let's say, then everybody sort of agrees to keep their price high. If you have a monopoly, they can jack up the price because there's no competition. The same thing if you have one buyer for the basics, and there's no one competing with that buyer. So the buyer could say, okay, look, this is how much the drug, we're going to pay for this drug. Or, doctor, you finished your medical school, and this is how much, if you accept Medicare, this is how much the patients would be. You don't have to accept Medicare. You don't need to take it. But if you do, you just get a lot of business right away. So people do it for the volume.
And Medicare for All now polling at 60%. Federally funded health insurance for everybody polling at 61%.
Oh, so basically Medicare for All, 60%. That's half the country that actually wants the same system that they have in Australia and pretty much half of the developed world. And 61%, which is statistically pretty much the same for some sort of public option.
So I tell to my Democratic friends, you might want to try something that's popular for a change. So, and finally, on the idea that, hey, listen, everybody can't get health care. Well, this is not like furniture, which sometimes you allude to, Ben. you can have good furniture, bad furniture. I've had it all.
All right. I like that he actually listened to Ben's podcasts and shows and debates, so he can actually reference the things that Ben actually says. That also kind of props to him for doing that.
Right. That's optional. If you don't have good health care, you die. And
yeah, people are kind of thinking, okay, I can't really boo that because it's true. Let's see. You're sick. You don't get health care. Yeah, you're pretty much not so well off.
And so I view it as not something that capitalism should deal with, and I believe in capitalism, and I think they make great sneakers, but something that is about equality of opportunity. And you cannot have equality of opportunity if you're dead. So Medicare for all.
Okay, I like how he put that if you're dead, you can't have equality of opportunity. You can't really argue with that. When he said, capitalism makes great sneakers, it's a bit of a caricature. And so people kind of start, the ones that love capitalism, they really just tune him out at that point. So, okay. I mean, what are you going to do? It's a debate. You got to say something.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So a couple of notes in response to the Medicare for All shtick. So this is Bernie Sanders shtick, obviously. The problem with Medicare...
What's wrong with being a Bernie Sanders shtick? He goes to red states, states that vote. He talks to people that voted for Republicans for years, and he convinces them that, it's in their interest to be insured and for the government to help them, because they've put into society and maybe they would like to at least have some safety net for themselves. And a lot of these people are hit hard. I personally think if Bernie Sanders had run against Donald Trump, he would have taken a lot of the Rust Belt that went to Donald Trump, because Bernie Sanders actually has been fighting for the working man. And these are the people that, faced with Hillary and Trump, voted for Trump. So in this point, he would have had a lot of points that Trump took. And frankly, after Bernie dropped out, Trump cribbed a lot of his policies. So I actually like Trump's policies, many of them. And many of them come from Bernie. Like closing corporate loopholes that he mentioned in debates with Hillary. Like the $1 trillion infrastructure plan to repair a crumbling infrastructure. Actually, if you go to berniesanders.com, say what is it, Sanders. Whatever, you'll find on the left the policies, and on the right, you'll find how to pay for them. One of the things about Bernie Sanders also is he's not a raving socialist as he's portrayed, someone who has no idea how he's going to pay for all this. He actually says pretty reasonable things. I don't agree with him on everything. I don't think that college should be free for everybody. I think education is not the same thing as college. Education should be subsidized by the government. But you could do online courses. But on the other hand, Bernie actually has thought through his policies, and he's able to make a lot of good comebacks and points. For example, people say we can't afford to raise the minimum wage. You can't have that much money. He says, well, how can we afford to raise all the salaries for the CEOs? It comes out of the same company, right? I mean, there's points to be made. I don't think Bernie Sanders, it's like an ad hominem attack to just say, oh, it's a Bernie Sanders thing, so just ignore it. And also, that's what they did with Ron Paul as well.
Medicare for All is that when people say that it's affordable, this isn't affordable to the person who has the Medicare. It is not affordable to the country. In fact, it is so unaffordable to the country that the state of California was a nut job leftist state, just refused to even pass Medicare for All because it would have immediately doubled the debt.
That is true. California does actually have serious problems with its single-payer system. But that doesn't mean that every single jurisdiction and polity on earth has a problem. In fact, most of the developed world has universal health care. In fact, every country except for the United States has universal coverage. And they can afford it because they're not all going bankrupt. So how are they doing it? Well, some of them have single payer. Some of them, like Singapore, have basically a good capitalistic system, and yet they force the people to put into health savings accounts and other things like that. How slavery? How un-American? Anyway, yeah, they are un-American. They're Singapore.
As far as the idea that medical care is a right, but it's not actually a good or a service, this is a way to make things less plentiful. If you declare things rights, but you don't actually incentivize the creation of those things, you don't get more of them. So The South African Constitution has right in there that healthcare is a right, that housing is a right. The fact is that you don't have good housing or healthcare in South Africa because just declaring things rights does not make them appear. What makes more things appear is a market-based system that creates more doctors, that creates more medical care, that creates more incentive for people to join up. So,
by the way, this is what it comes down to. It's sort of conservative ideology, fiscal conservative ideology. Okay, it's shared by libertarians as well as people on the right. Let's say, just regular conservatives. They could be liberal on many social things, right? Women can wear bikinis on the beach. Women can work. You could have interracial marriage. They'll give on the social, but when it comes to the fiscal conservatism, there's sort of this like hardline ideology, like taxation is theft, and the free market is what creates all the prosperity. Like you have to have capitalism. That's the only way to have everything. And if you unfettered capitalism, and if you restrict the capitalism in any way, then it's just going to reduce prosperity for everybody. That's sort of an ideology, but the thing is, with all theories, you need to test them against the real world. And certainly these other countries, that you have to explain, how is it that all these other countries are able to cover everybody universally, right? The other thing is, I like how Ben sort of simplified this idea into a dichotomy. On the one hand, he's saying there's goods, which is capitalism, and you trade them in a market system. On the other hand, there's rights. And he's basically saying, look, rights is sort of this language, is democracy and this rights. It doesn't lead to anything, really. It doesn't really produce anything. Goods produce, and goods will eventually produce more. And so instead of having rights, it will just trickle down to everybody, right? So that's what he's kind of saying. I'll just remark one thing. A lot of things can be both goods and rights, okay? So, for example, in ancient Rome, they built aqueducts, and water came into the cities. That was pretty amazing. You didn't have to go to the river, okay, because the water came to you. It came to the bathhouse. You could go to the bathhouse. Public bathhouses for the public. That's awesome. But today, we want water to come to our own house. And not just any water. We want clean, potable, safe drinking water to come through our faucet. And when we don't, well, we complain to the government. So Ben, is it a right to have public, safe drinking water that comes to your house? Or is it a public good? It's both, okay? It's both because we were able to build the utilities and now we regulate them to make sure everyone has it. So that last part, regulation, that everyone has it, that is what you refer to in the language of rights, essentially. It's just guarantees that are now possible to extend to everybody, but in the past were possibly not. Like child mortality. In the past, only the rich, and sometimes even the rich, couldn't afford the kind of things that we have today. Air conditioners, cars, all the kinds of things we have today, we have by virtue of just living today. They're free gifts to us. We're just living today rather than 1,000 years ago. So this whole thing of whether you deserve it or not is sort of like small compared to the fact that you get so much today just by being alive.
So my wife is a doctor. That means she has to go through 1,000 years of medical training, and we have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to make her a doctor. The idea that you're going to have the government come in and then dictate the sort of care that she should provide to each particular patient, and then dictate how much she should be paid for that care, is going to lead to a decrease in the number of people who are going into the medical industry, which decreases the level of care overall.
Okay, few things. First of all, Ben Shapiro is married to a doctor, and so he has a firsthand experience of how the doctors are squeezed by Medicare and other large insurance companies, by the way, not just Medicare. But that's what insurance companies do. They come in and they squeeze, they sort of negotiate down a lower price. Like I said, that's what causes the prices to go lower. So I think it's pretty safe to argue, and I think Ben Shapiro will eventually agree if you told him this, that single payer achieves lower prices just by virtue of collective bargaining power. Okay? Hey, doctor, you want all these patients? Then accept Medicare, but these are the terms, right? You don't have to, but this is what it is. But then Ben Shapiro invokes the image of the government coming in and telling you how much you can charge and so forth. And that is significant because if you look at, let's say, Amazon squeezing the publishers, or Apple squeezing developers, or Facebook or Twitter knocking people off of their ecosystem, right? A sort of pay to play, and if they don't like you, they could just knock you off. And you look at the former USSR, and you look at all these totalitarian regimes. There is a danger, right, of the public giving the government too much power to squeeze producers, okay? And so that's, it's a sliding scale, and you should be careful, but you want lower prices for the people, right? In other countries, they have those lower prices. Now, he mentioned that these lower prices will lead to a shortage of doctors, less doctors, etc. But if you look here, you look at the graphs, and you look at the statistics, the U.S. is not near the top of having most doctors per capita, or even most hospital beds per capita, okay? Now they come back and say, well, but we have the best hospital beds. Really? Okay, let's even say you have the best hospital beds, but you have 3 times less hospital beds per person, okay? So some people just don't have a bed, and one person has a super duper bed. What do you think? Do they really need that super duper? Is the society really better off? No. So how is it that these other countries have more doctors per capita, not less, okay? Remember, he said this.
Patient, and then dictate how much you should be paid for that care is going to lead to a decrease in the number of people who are going into the medical industry, which decreases the level of care overall.
Well, that happened. And in other countries, there's more doctors. And some countries have not just more doctors per person, but also better health outcomes. They have, for example, less child mortality, less infant mortality than in the United States. Now, how is that? Why is the United States, if it's the best in the world, just, kind of slacking off on the infant mortality thing? What is going on? They're just like, oh, well, infant mortality, that's like not the most important thing. Or how about life expectancy? Now, life expectancy is a tricky one. Even though in other countries, the U.S. is like not the top in life expectancy, is like below top 10, and so, but why? Well, there's a big variety, first of all, of genetics in the United States. It's a big melting pot. Okay, that's one. Certainly, if you have some homogeneous gene pool that's like, maybe predisposed genetically to longer lifespan for whatever reason, that could be one. There could be a homogeneous culture that just eats well and better, because in the United States you have all the, you had all this, again, capitalism in some way. You have the factory farms, right, capitalism. You have the antibiotics that are kind of given to the animals in the factory farms, and then the people eat it, and then the superbugs, which are resistant to the antibiotics, just spread throughout the population, and now we have the problem with the superbugs. So these are side effects of capitalism, yeah? So this is an example. Another example is like, all the high fructose corn syrup and sugar and all this stuff that they put in everyone's food. And that leads to diabetes and obesity and all this stuff. So yeah, like on the one hand, you have an industry that's fattening you up, and on the other hand, you have an industry that's trying to save your life. So all of these things are working together, and you can't really tease apart just one thing and say that is the thing. But if you're going to say one thing, it's for lower prices, it's single payer.
This is why I say that it is better to treat things as goods than as rights, because declaring something a right just means that you have the right to steal it from me. But declaring something a good means that you get a market process that leads to lower prices and better care over time. And the big problem we've had before Obamacare is that it was already treated quasi as a right. You had it heavily regulated on the state level. It is continually heavily regulated. The idea there's a completely unregulated market is absolute nonsense. The reason that you have employer-based health insurance...
Do you want it to be a completely unregulated market? The thing is, okay, taxes are bad, they're stealing, the government's bad. Okay, what is the alternative now? Okay, you could start a libertarian utopia somewhere. It's always interesting to me. Conservatives speak as if they're like these libertarians, but they don't have sometimes the guts to go full libertarian and go, okay, let's abolish the whole government. So you're for small government. But what is the government going to do? Okay, army, I guess patents, if you're an Ayn Rand fan, right? The product of man's mind must be protected, and the government has to step in there. You get courts, you get whatever, right? It's just the minimal government. So I guess you can just put out any drug, and any quack can just sell this drug, and then people just buyer beware. You might die. Yeah, maybe, I don't know, but that's not how most countries operate. So this is sort of a radical vision. So invoking Bernie Sanders as being this radical socialist, this is way more radical. It's never been tried. I mean, it's been tried before. People said, okay, we need to have the Meat Inspection Act because this meat is just killing us. There's bacteria in this meat, which they discovered. So people passed laws to actually get away from it. But it's a radical idea to sort of get back to it, I guess, and have no government. But that's not what conservatives want. They borrow the terminology of anarcho-capitalists and libertarians, the American type, the ones that love capitalism, and they borrow that. but they don't go all the way. They sort of use it to make these feel-good statements, but when push comes to shove, they can't repeal the act because the public wants to have health care. They don't want to die.
Insurance in the first place was as a response to wage and price controls placed in the aftermath of World War II, and employers began giving health insurance as an actual good, right? They gave it as an actual incentive to their employees. If you had an actual individual-based health insurance market, you bought it just like you bought your car insurance, you would see more and better health care for everyone.
I would love to hear more about that, by the way. I know this is a debate, but I wish Ben would go into, on a show or something, more about what price controls and what wage controls are we talking about. I'm sort of trying to follow along here and think, okay, maybe the employers were told you can't pay more than this to your employees, which is kind of weird. But if they were told that, then I can see them going, okay, well, after we pay the salary, guess what? We'll also give you pay health insurance or something like that. They found the loophole. But I don't think that's what he's talking about. So I sort of don't know. He's sort of making this story about how, I guess, employers started giving health insurance. But think about it. Tying health insurance to employment and your employer is a little bit either anachronistic or it's not the right incentive. It's not the right incentive structure. What if you're unemployed? What if you're self-employed? What if you're a homemaker? What if you're a student, a poet, or something else? Oh, well, you're disincentivized, because now you got to find your own, maybe freelancers union health insurance or something. I mean, yeah, maybe. Or maybe you could just have everybody insured like in every other country. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yep. All right. So, Ben, I don't want to steal health insurance from you. I want you to be healthy. That's why I want Medicare-for-All.
All right. I guess not everybody got that. Well, he's basically saying that it's not a zero-sum game. I'm not stealing the same thing from you. It's not like a piece of furniture where either you have it or I have it. That's what he's saying. But he's treating them both as consumers. Of course, you are taking up the producer's time, and that's what Ben is about to say.
You just want to take my money and my wife's services.
So, Republicans frame taxes as stealing. That's preposterous. So if we don't have taxes...
Okay, I like that he addresses right away the points that the other person makes. In many debates, people just kind of talk at cross purposes and they kind of come in with their own thing and they don't address the other person at all. What I like about Cenk is he addresses the other people, and I like that about Ben as well. He addresses what Cenk says. So far, I'm seeing sort of them addressing the other in the following ways. Ben uses a lot of ad hominems and ideology, like, oh, this is Bernie Sanders thing. Oh, this is, like, basically these are socialist wealth redistribution things. And then he always pushes his own ideology, which is the free market ideology. Now, of course, if you just wholesale believe in the free market ideology, you think, look, there's no data that could possibly contradict it. Every time there is data, there's something wrong. There's some variable that explains it. Explains the reason that Israel has better, is able to cover everybody. And let's say it doesn't have to be Israel. It could be any country that actually has it. I just picked Israel because it's Ben Shapiro. Like, I think he would respect Israel's system in this case. But he basically uses the ideology, and he frames it all in the ideology. Now, Cenk also uses ad hominems. And he uses ad hominems not at people, but at like, Republicans or at ideologies. So he attacks ideologies. Ben attacks like Bernie Sanders, right, or a person. The other thing is Cenk will actually use facts and actually look at things. He used to be a Republican. He used to have the same ideology. Then he looked at the facts. He looked at the data, and he's like, wait, well, it doesn't really explain the data. So he kind of adjusted his mind, which I respect him for. And I guess, everyone has his faults, but this is one thing that I respect about Cenk is I think he actually changed his mind because he saw the data and he saw like the actual statistics, which I don't have all the answers. I don't know how to explain the data, but if a theory doesn't explain the data, I can verify that. And I can say, well, maybe this theory needs a little adjusting.
If we don't have taxes, well, we can't do all the things that we want to do as a community. Now, there are some things that we just talked about that we don't want to do as a community, we want to do as individuals. In fact, the things that we want to do as individuals are much greater. That's why we're a mixed economy, but largely capitalist, and I agree with that.
By the way, I sort of like how he makes these distinctions. A lot of times when you're a debater, or if you're just trying to convince people, maybe you're a teacher or a politician, you really need to frame things in the right way. It's not enough to know the facts. It's not enough to know sort of ideas and theories. You need to also be able to present them correctly. And so one of the ways to do that is to have sort of a simple dichotomy. As a community, you want to do something, you need taxes. As individuals, you don't. You have a market. I think that's a pretty good way to present it. So I guess props to Cenk for sort of, and props to Ben earlier also with his dichotomy. But also, I just want to say, the dichotomies, you got to always watch out for straw men. Okay, when you have a dichotomy, you tend to slot complex things into simple categories. And it's not always simple. Like I said, we live in a complicated world, and we try to see which system works better for what. And we're not always going to be perfect, but, we got to try to see, look at other countries, look at other societies, look at our own corporations, and see what we can improve.
And I run a small business myself, getting larger every day. So,
he's trying to promote his thing, but not enough people in your audience, man.
But there are some things that the government should do. They should do the military, cops, roads, bridges, and yes, education and healthcare. That's because, conservatives seem a little confused about how healthcare works. Paul Ryan had a...
Wait, roads, bridges? Okay, I could kind of see that. I mean, the thing about roads and bridges, you see, you could have competition. But the problem is, then you have like 20 bridges, right? And they compete on price. Some places you can't, but some places you just have the one bridge. And if you have that one bridge or that one road, it's a monopoly either way, right? So you might as well have that monopoly answerable to the people. That's sort of a thing. If you can have 20 bridges, I don't necessarily think that they should be run by the government. But when you have healthcare, again, you can have doctors compete. You can have doctors not accept Medicare. You can have that. Everyone's free to do whatever. It's just that the government simply pays for everyone's health insurance with a single payer system that people pay into. And presumably people still need to eat, people still need to be insured for health, because they're going to use those funds anyway. There's no free lunch, and if you don't pay the taxes for food or whatever, you still pay for food. You just compete with all the other people that are paying for food, so your prices rise. So yeah, sometimes you do want to pay for things as a community, but I do agree, there's a danger of going the other way and squeezing the producers too much. So with great power comes great responsibility. Oh, Spider-Man.
A whole press conference about this. Ben a little bit alluded to it there. They're like, oh my God, it turns out the healthy subsidize the sick. Yeah, that's insurance. That's how it works. It's like the people with that are not getting into accidents are subsidizing the accidents.
Yeah, that's kind of the thing, okay? Even with Medicare, that's what's going on, okay? When you're 20 and you're working, you're paying into Medicare, you ain't getting the Medicare in America, right? In Australia, it's also called Medicare, but it's Medicare-for-All. The point is, you're paying into Medicare, you're not getting the Medicare at 20. You're getting it after 65, okay? So yeah, it's the healthy paying and the employed paying into the system. Now, you could be sick and employed, but that's a small minority. So typically, the wealth is being transferred from the healthy onto the sick. But that is insurance. That's an insurance pool. That's what insurance schemes do in general. In fact, the first insurance schemes, let's say Charles Babbage, a great inventor in the 19th century, who invented the first computers and built schematics for computers. He also worked in a company that was it's called something like Society for the Preservation of Lives. If you think about it, insurance companies and governments that provide insurance, they're actually aligned with you. You think insurance companies are these bad things, but think about it. They argue with you whether to pay your premiums. Of course, nobody wants to pay out. To pay your fee. You have to pay the doctor, and the doctor argues, and you argue. But guess what? These insurance companies pay less to doctors if the public is healthier, right? And if the public is more sick, then they lose more money. So in fact, by having everyone insured, you're creating an incentive for an insurance company to increase public health. And they would actually invest in startups like diet apps, with deep learning that will figure out what's the best diet for everybody, like exercise apps, like gym membership apps, or whatever, okay? Whatever people come up with in the free market, these insurance companies will be the first to want to subsidize that, to invest in that. And the government would want to invest in those innovations. Why? To improve the public health. So isn't it great to have someone want to improve the public health? Cenk?
Yes, that's car insurance. That's how insurance works. And yes, taxes work in that we all decide we're going to do X, but we're not going to do Y. And I think it is fair for society to say that yes, we are going to do health care for everybody. Everybody. We're not going to leave 20 million people uninsured. We're not going to leave 30 million people uninsured. That's not what we do in a civilized society.
What I like is both of these guys know their facts. They know how to present their facts. So you can kind of sit back and rely on them not to make a stupid mistake like, oh, how many people were not insured or whatever. Usually there are exceptions. And of course, this is a live debate. So your mileage may vary. But these guys are professionals.
And from time to time, they attack against Medicare. They say, oh, it's an entitlement. Yeah, we paid for it through payroll taxes our whole lives. You're goddamn right we're entitled to it because we paid for it. We paid for it. And so when you take out the middlemen of the insurance companies that put their profits in there, that put their marketing in there, that put their lobbyist money in there, that means more savings for Americans. And so finally, the idea that it can't be done is preposterous since every other Western developed country does some version of single payer. It obviously can be done, and it is done at lower rates and better coverage.
I need to say, this is the thing that needed to be said. It is being done, and it has better outcomes. So I'm looking forward to see what Ben says to that, because these are facts, and that's ideology, and maybe the ideology is true, but then how do you deal with these facts?
So let me...
Wow, he's got a lot of cheers there.
Add something to this question.
That's the main point.
Respond to it if you want to, but Cenk referenced Paul Ryan. When the Republicans took control of Congress, Paul Ryan, the Speaker of the House, famously said...
So he kind of wants to go on because, it's been like 15 minutes. My commentary has been even longer. Thanks for listening, by the way. I guess you're finding this interesting. So he wants to move on, but these debaters will kind of stay on the same topic, which is good because I want to understand, how does Ben Shapiro explain the data?
Said we need to switch from being an opposition party to being a proposition party. So what's your evaluation, Ben, of their efforts in that direction to unite the party and move legislation forward?
I mean, we all have eyes. They suck at it. I mean, and Paul Ryan is not exactly my go-to guy when it comes to political acumen and genius.
Well, I guess he's not invited to Paul Ryan's barbecues.
I more want to respond to some of the contentions that Cenk was making about Medicare-for-All and single-payer healthcare.
Thank you. You're getting back to the topic.
A couple of things. One, when you say we pay for it, that's not technically true. The idea that everybody who's paying into Medicaid pays...
See, he's got the pen over there, so he's probably taking notes on what Cenk said. Really props to him, by the way. I like that. He takes the notes, he responds to the points, and that's very good. During the debate, the more they respond to each other's points and actually finish the open loops that are going on, the more I actually enjoy these guys, as opposed to just talking past each other the whole night. So this is awesome. Thank you, Ben.
For it, and now they get out what they paid in is obviously not true. It is a redistributive program, and to pretend otherwise is just silly. The people who are paying the payroll taxes are not the people who are taking out through Medicaid.
And that's a fair point. He's basically saying this is yet another example of redistribution of wealth. So when you say you're entitled to it, usually entitlements means some people didn't pay into it, but they feel like they should get it, right? And that's what Ben is saying. And Cenk sort of said, well, it is an entitlement because we paid into it. Well, some of us did and some of us didn't. So Ben makes a fair point here. What are you talking about, Cenk? What do you mean we paid into it?
Obviously.
Can I just address that super quick? So if we're talking about Medicare, right? Not Medicaid.
Right.
So in Medicare, so you're both correct and incorrect. So it's not like I put in $20 and I get $20 back. That part is true.
Right.
but we all pay into Medicare together, and then we all get it when we
So
are
can I
sick.
ask you,
That-
so can I
which
ask
is
you a question?
insurance.
I have two-
Okay, so Cenk clarified. So basically, what he's saying is, look, it's not on an individual basis. Some people didn't pay into Medicare, but they're still going to get it. Yeah. And I think Ben basically says the same thing. Like, I don't think he wants to abolish government and have only charities. I don't know. Maybe he does. Frankly, most people wouldn't agree with him, judging by polls. Hands off my Medicare. But maybe Ben's secretly an anarcho-capitalist. But so basically, these guys are on the same page. And once Cenk clarified what he said, what does Ben go on to
Two
say?
questions, really serious questions. One,
Okay.
what is your ideal tax rate?
So I guess this was going to be a second question. What is your ideal tax rate? I feel like he's prepared this to try to trap Cenk because put him in a corner or sort of say, okay, well, central planner man, what are you going to? What's your number? And why?
Because it's going to cost a lot of money for a lot of this stuff. And two, what is your ideal level of medical care? Because the fact is that we can spend millions of dollars on people at end of life care. We can spend millions of dollars on surgeries and preventative care. I mean, healthcare is an expensive business, even under a single-payer system, which is why generally you end up with rationing. So, what is your ideal level of healthcare that is provided to everyone?
Okay, a couple things. He just sort of like slips in there. Oh, you get rationing, and like Cenk. Okay, he has to either go back and address the rationing, and then kind of. I hope he has a pen as well, writing these things down, which I don't think he does. I think he's listening to Ben because Ben's looking at him. This is a nice debating tactic, by the way. Look at your opponent, sort of give him things to answer while you're slipping in all these like extra things that he's not. It's just like the audience, the ones that agree with you already are like, yup. And the other ones are like, rationing, yeah. He's not going to answer that because he's looking at you in your eyes, and he's not going to write it down. So that's a nice sort of debating tactic. I don't think he did it consciously, but then again, I don't know. He's a pretty smart guy. And, maybe I would do it. Maybe I could, and he debates a lot. So maybe that's a tactic.
And what sort of tax rate are you proposing to subsidize that?
Yeah. So those are very, very fair questions. So let's talk about taxes for a second. So conservatives agree or say all the time that the golden era of America was.
All right. So he's going to answer the questions directly. Basically, everything that's been asked him, he's going to answer directly. Kind of like what Ben was doing with the moderator. And that's sometimes a weakness in a debate. You could actually trick a person by sort of slipping in a bunch of stuff and then asking him a direct question, and he's just going to answer the direct question. And then the other stuff you get for free. You sort of like do inception with the audience, like, well, there's rationing. Anyway, he's going to talk about taxes. Let's see what he says.
Was the 1950s and 1960s. Well, there's a lot of truth to that. Our economy was booming at the time, and we became the number one economy in the world at that time. The tax rate for the highest bracket fluctuated between 70 and 91%. So that is when we were at our best. Now, I want to be clear.
I don't think we were at our best then. But he's making the point, he was asked what would be your tax rate. And I think that's really sort of a trick question. It's not about what you think the tax rate should be. It's about the democratic process and seeing which systems work better. In fact, you can pay lower taxes and have single-payer health insurance, okay? Because per capita, single-payer pays less. So it could work out, the math could work out, that the economy of scale would actually make you pay less overall than you would. And by the way, Michael Moore has this thing with like, what is it, Michael Moore, French taxes, or something like that. Look for that. He's going to tell you, look, the French also pay taxes, right? And it goes through this single-payer program, and then they get more for their money. You still have to pay for the daycare, for the co-pays, for the deductibles. You still have to pay that. It's just that you're competing with everyone else as well, so the prices go up. But again, Cenk kind of takes the bait, and he wants to talk now about another topic, which I like because we're not just here on healthcare. It's Cenk versus Ben. So let's talk about the 50s and how the FDR had really high tax rates, and how Eisenhower, the Republican president, had a progressive platform just as progressive as Bernie Sanders' platform.
Clear. I'm also a businessman, and boy, that seems high. It does, okay? And one of the reasons my family were Republicans when I was growing up was because before Reagan came in, the highest marginal tax rate was 70%. So now we are nowhere near that. We have reduced taxes to bare bones, and we have shifted the taxes onto the middle class and away from the rich and corporations.
Okay, so he didn't take the bait. He actually makes a point. The taxes used to be this in the past, and I was a Republican. And now, look, the taxes are nowhere near that. And so whatever you think the tax rate should be, it was higher in the past, and we were doing well. So, like, there's room on that Laffer curve, named after the economist Laffer in the Reagan administration, who basically inspired some of the trickle-down economics that they implemented. Art Laffer.
So there is a much better balance to be had. And if you said to me, well, you're going to have $800 in taxes that are new, I say, wow, that hurts. But you're going to save $1,000 in premiums, deal. That is a deal I will take every time because I can do math.
Okay.
So
yeah, I think that's pretty clear. Of course, I'm not sure the details, how are you going to save that? But if that happened, yeah. It's kind of like what Donald Trump said in the past. Oh, we're going to spend all this on healthcare, but we're going to get more on the other side. Remember that old Donald Trump? That was like 5 years ago. Okay, maybe 10 years.
The beginning of your answer to taxes, and then you said how much care. Well, so that is something that all the countries that do single payer or a version of single payer struggle with, and they have learned a lot of lessons. And if we stop saying, America's number one, we might actually just, first of all, on this issue, we're number 37.
So,
And
All right, he kind of cherry-picked that. There are different basically polls, and there are some kind of organizations that seem to be very biased about wanting America to be single-payer. That doesn't mean they fudge their data necessarily, but 37 is just one of the polls. Typically, America's like number 11, which is still not the top. That still means you can pull off single-payer and have it done better than we have it here, with better outcomes and better metrics like child mortality and life expectancy, for example.
And if we looked at what Japan is doing so well, keeping costs down to half of ours and less, we might actually learn something from Japan, Switzerland, and other countries. And by the way, when we...
I like what he said, learn from other countries. He invoked Japan, so I wonder if Ben Shapiro is going to bring up the fact that Japan's teetering on the brink of insolvency, unless you're a modern monetary theorist and think, oh, they can always print more money. Yeah, but that has nothing to do with the fact that Japan actually pays less per person and got the costs down for healthcare. We can copy that. We don't have to copy everything. And of course, other countries like Switzerland have an incredible system that covers everybody. And we should look at that stuff.
You see Medicare-for-All, Medicare Advantage exists. So you can actually add private insurance on top of that. And I find that perfectly great. I have no problems with that at all. So that is the government making sure you don't die and actually lowering rates for you. And then if you want more insurance, no problem.
So making sure you don't die. Yeah, that sounds pretty good. Now, it could be hyperbole, but we said earlier, if you're sick and you don't get the health care, right, then you might die. Also, preventative procedures, right? You want to go to a dentist, get your checkups, go get your mammogram, okay? Those things can save your life. But if you are sort of low on cash, you might not go. There are people, literally, and in the red states, and ones that Bernie Sanders spoke to. And, it's not necessarily red states or not. It's people who, are suspicious of the government running the insurance, but yet they can't afford to go to do preventative checkups. So public health is important, right? People should all eat. I don't think anybody will vote for themselves to not eat. But on top of that, the doctors could have any other types of insurance. You could add private insurance to that. I agree with Cenk here. I think there's many progressives that would do away with private insurance. In fact, if there was Medicare-for-All, it would be hard for private insurance to compete because Medicare-for-All would get the same things at a lower price, which, according to capitalism, would drive out all the private insurance out of the market. So can the government sometimes do better than market participants? Possibly. But we need to have freedom to be able to get more surgery, whatever you want, more plastic surgery, more insurance, more whatever. But the minimum, just the minimum expectations, running water, police, courts, it would be nice if everyone had access to that stuff. And then on top of that, we can have capitalism.
All this sounds great, except for the fact that Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security eat up 66% of the federal budget every single year. The idea that all of these socialized medicine countries have it so much better than we do.
Okay, a couple things. The first fact. So Ben likes to throw out these facts rapid fire. So let's take them one at a time. Luckily, we have the pause button. So clicking anywhere on this video pauses. Okay, check out. So that's irrelevant, Ben, that 66% of our budget is Medicare and Medicaid. So first of all, if we switch to a single-payer system, we might actually pay less as a society for health care, right? Because, again, you have to pay your insurance company anyway. So if all that, at the end of the day, you're paying less, that's a net savings to people. That's number one. Number two, who cares how much of the budget it is? The budget, look, out of my paycheck, how much goes to the Army to fund 800 bases around the world? That's 30 times more bases than the entire world combined outside of the United States. The entire world combined has 30 bases, something like that. And we have 800. Okay, so what if I don't want to fund that? So, okay, but Republicans tell me I have to fund more McDonald's, more free stuff for our soldiers because they're running out of food, they're running out of clothes, and oh yeah, we just opened another base, so you have to pay for that. So, look, these parties are always going to tell me, subsidize this, subsidize domestic oil production because OPEC is going to lower prices. We can't have our industry grind to a halt. We need to subsidize fossil fuels. And then, clean energy. Well, that's a left liberal thing. So we're gonna fight against that. We're gonna do coal plants. Like, okay, I get it. You want smaller government, but then some things you want government to subsidize and have more of. It's irrelevant how much of the budget is taken up. You can have a smaller government budget. The question is, what system produces better results for less money? And in this case, it is not the private insurance company. How do we know? Because we can look at the graph of United States versus every other developed country. And it's a huge outlier. It pays more than everybody else, and it gets less than at least the top 10 countries.
Particularly in terms of cancer care, is a joke. We are still number one in terms of 5-year cancer survival rate here.
Well, first of all, that's excellent. We are number one in cancer survivor rate. First of all, that's great. Secondly, maybe if the food pyramid didn't feature things that now they're going back on and saying, well, maybe we shouldn't have featured so much bread and so much sugar and so much other stuff, right? If we didn't put sugar into everything, maybe people wouldn't have so much cancer in the first place. But put that to the side for a second. Okay, one thing is the cancer stuff. So what about everything else?
Here in the United States. And when you talk about top marginal tax rates...
Wait, you just said one thing we're better at. What about more hospital beds per person, more doctors per person, better life expectancy, better happiness and health outcomes in other countries, less infant mortality, and other things as well. Okay, we have great medicine here. But what about everywhere else? What about all those other things? Now, I'm going to make one point here. And this is an overriding point about Ben Shapiro and people on the right, on radio and pundits and so forth. There's a lot of ideology. And sort of his thing is always saying, look, this is the way the world works, okay? And if you basically, you have to agree with me that it basically works according to my favorite theory, says it has to work. And I'm going to cherry pick examples. Like, look, we're the best in cancer treatments. Well, actually, around the world, there are innovations about cancer treatments, okay? But here's the thing, Ben. You're not an expert on economics. Just like with climate change, you're not a scientist, and you don't have to play one on TV. It's okay to not know. And to his credit, Ben sometimes admits, I'm not a scientist. But then he goes on and basically says, look, I've read the science, it's all bunk. Okay, dude, you're not a scientist. You're a political pundit. You're a very smart guy. You're gifted. And you were a musician when you were a kid. And I know what that's like, and that's awesome. But the thing is, you need to be a little humble about what you know. And the thing is, people who are on the right in terms of fiscal policy, whether they're libertarians or conservatives, they're like instant experts. They tell everybody, you don't understand economics. Only Austrian economics is the best, and the only true economics. It's sort of this like thing. But here's the thing. There's data in the world. You could see that some of the other systems work better for some things. For some things, capitalism works well. For other things, you have capitalism plus regulations. For other things, you have a gift economy, okay? I get that you like capitalism, but there are sometimes other systems that work better. For example, you want to talk about innovation in cancer drugs. Okay, So you want to have the government enforce intellectual property, right? Patents for corporations. And sometimes these corporations, they patent the drug, like the formula, for 17 years. Then when the 17 years are almost up, they change one atom and patent it again. So that's 34 years that they can restrict others from building on that drug. Now, what if instead people were allowed to innovate on top of other people's innovations, like they do in every other science, like they do in physics, geology, biology, and etc. They, once it's sometimes publicly funded. People actually do walkathons. I remember I saw a lot of walkathons. People used to do Race for the Cure, right? And the pink ribbon. That's also, where's that money go? Where's that money go, Ben? It goes to fund the public universities. And the public funds the researchers. But when the researcher finds the breakthrough, he's snapped up by the pharma company and his intellectual property, they get a patent, and no one else can build on it. But what if people were allowed to build on it the way Einstein or Newton, who stood on the shoulders of Newton, and Newton said, I stood on the shoulders of giants. What about that? Then we basically have a gift economy. You know where else you can see this? You could see this in open source software. So look at capitalism and look at open source software, okay? So we already know that Firefox, Google Chrome, Linux, Wikipedia, right? They do more for the world than Windows, Internet Explorer, and Britannica, right? Internet Explorer is great, but Google Chrome and Firefox are open source, right? Linux, it can run on toasters. Like Windows can run on one type of processor. Linux, somebody can write it to run on a toaster. They can make a toaster running Linux, right? They can make a tiny computer and it runs Linux. Can't run Windows. Why? That's called the long tail. That's because anyone is free to take the source code and build on it. That's collaboration rather than competition. There's some competition and there's some building on top of each other. So what happens is if you want to solve and cure diseases like malaria, for example, then maybe patents are not the best way to go. So you have this landscape of ideas, and you want to turn it into capitalism and competition, so you grant monopolies and ownership of ideas to people and corporations. And these corporations run with these ideas. And you have software patents and drug patents and all that stuff. But if you allowed innovations to come from anywhere, well, then you wouldn't make this argument that the U.S. is the best at cancer drugs, because in Norway they would build on that and have more innovation, and you'd have a Wikipedia of cancer drug research, and then the whole world could contribute to something, and some people would solve malaria, and some people would solve other diseases that possibly right now don't have enough funding. And that's what Bill Gates talks about with the creative capitalism. But anyway, my point is that capitalism is one system, open source, let's say gift economy, is another system. And we see that it's, over the last 20 years, produced way more benefit for the world. Like this World Wide Web, for example, that we're using right now. It's open source. Here, view. Well, I can view the source, basically, of this web page. And that's really useful because I can then take it and build on it. Okay, continue.
In the 1950s, there are a couple of things that are worth noting. One, that was top individual marginal tax rates, not necessarily the business tax rate. We now have some of the highest corporate tax rates altogether in the industrialized world. And if you would prefer for us to destroy half of the world before we become the only country that didn't have its industrial capacity destroyed, which is what happened in the 1940s, leading to us being the only productive country on planet Earth, essentially.
Wait, he didn't say we want to destroy the whole world.
For the next 2 decades, I'm not with you there. I'm not really in favor of...
Yeah, but he didn't advocate for destroying the world.
...having a giant world war that destroys all industrial capacity across the West, so we're the only people who actually have the capacity to produce anything and just markets that we can provide to.
It's kind of a straw man because he's basically attacking something Cenk didn't say. There's a lot of fans in the audience and they cheer for that. I would boo for that just because it's a straw man. But he could have said it another way. He's basically saying, look, we had prosperity, but it's not because we had large taxes. It's because the rest of the world was bombed out. And Detroit was making cars. And we had manufacturing. And before the Marshall Plan, helping Europe and rebuilding it, by the way, we didn't really help the USSR rebuild. They had their own thing. And the Marshall Plan was sort of the counterweight to what they were doing. But the point is that, yes, America and Japan was bombed out. They weren't making the cars either. So yes, the United States really was booming, and we didn't have much competition. I agree with Ben here, but really attacking Cenk for saying he wants to destroy the world is kind of a low blow.
Right. So, first of all, it is fair to say that, of course, the 1950s and 60s were different. We just come out of the war. So, but you have.
I like that he's being nice in this debate. I mean, I could see Cenk being kind of rude to people sometimes, but usually he's actually a nice guy and he's trying to address the point, the overall point.
Consider all the different factors. So one was that factor, and the other factor that was the one I mentioned. So when Republicans or conservatives say, well, high taxes by definition will lead to slower growth, well, we know because of our experience in the 1950s and 60s that isn't true. Now, you can say there are other factors, but you can't say that the highest marginal tax rate being 70 or even 90% slows down growth, because it didn't. And it wasn't in Japan and Switzerland. It was right here. And
all right, he doesn't get much cheers for this, so he's sort of right and he's sort of wrong. He's right that you cannot use, if you're going to prove something, right? And let's unpack this. If I want to prove to you X, okay, and I tell you that, X is true because look at Y, look at Z, right? How could it be? And you come back and you say, look, that's true, but what about A, B, C? X can't be true because, look, A, B, C contradicts it, right? And I said, well, A could have been because of this and B could have been because of that. Once I say that, I am no longer entitled to say I think X is true, and I'm proving it. It's not a proof anymore when you're like, well, yeah, it could be ABC, but it could also not be ABC. Yeah, so Cenk is right there. Where he's wrong is that Ben didn't try to prove that high tax rates are bad. I mean, I know he believes that, but he didn't try to prove that. And frankly, Cenk, yeah, okay, so maybe the high tax rates were okay in that specific situation only, when we had no competitors. So you're not proving anything either. So you guys are kind of talking across purposes here.
And so, and by the way, as a guy who grew up Republican, I was surprised by that too. I was surprised that Finland's system of non-competition in schools worked, but it does. So we have to be open to facts and understand. So, and
I like this. I know Ben also thinks this way, but there's just so much drive to just maneuver the other person that you forget that you might actually be allies in so many things. And you should care about the facts. And they don't care about your feelings. But I care about your feelings, so thank you.
And on the issue of where we're good and not good in healthcare, sure, there are different areas where we excel. But, Ben, honestly, you're cherry-picking there one particular area that we're good. Overall, we're number 37.
That is a fair point, Ben. Please address. I don't know about the number 37 thing, but we're not number 1. We're not number 2. We are not number 10. Please address this.
That is not a good result.
Well, you have
so
to break
if we're not
down what that
dying
means.
from cancer, we're dying from other things.
He says you got to break down what that means. All right, Ben. Again, life expectancy, infant mortality, number of patients, number of doctors per capita, number of beds per capita. I don't know. There's so many things you could talk about, but these are kind of major things. Please address why infant mortality is higher in the United States than other countries. If we are number 1.
It's empirical. We are not as healthy.
And again, all the sugar that they put in the food, which Europe bans. All the factory farms, which Europe bans. The antibiotics, etc.
Finally, this idea that corporations are paying the highest tax rate is both, again, true and untrue. The part that is true is, hey, there's a rate of 35%. The part that's not true is they don't actually pay that. There is giant loopholes.
Exactly. And people cheer.
And they've got two.
Because even if you're not a Cenk fan, you can recognize that corporations don't pay. And many of the largest corporations know the best loopholes. And, okay, continue.
$1 trillion sitting offshore, and they won't bring it in. And the reality is that if you look at the taxes from the 1950s, corporations...
I would love to see Ben Shapiro talk about auditing the Pentagon, for example, and trillions of dollars of waste there. I think these guys can agree on a lot of things, but for the show, they can't.
Used to pay about a third of our taxes, about 33% of the taxes overall. So they did their fair share, and that is fair. I don't want them paying all of it, but I want them paying a reasonable amount. Now...
What is a reasonable amount? Let's see what he says.
Share that corporations pay of taxes is down to 10%. You see what they did there? They did wealth redistribution. They took your wealth and redistributed to them.
Okay.
I think that is a masterful turn of phrase because he needs to make that point. Wealth redistribution can go both ways. And when you're on the right, you're always worried about wealth redistribution from the job creators. And, all these people that would create all the jobs. What will ever we do without these people when only the non-job creators, basically the poor people who don't contribute anything to society and just do drugs all day, get all the money so they can do more drugs all day? I'm kind of caricaturing, sorry, a little bit exaggerating, but that's actually what I've heard from some people on the right. The fact is, wealth redistribution can also go the other way, where a corporation that takes your money doesn't pay for your roads and doesn't pay for your health system or anything like that, but offshores their money and keeps it in other countries and invests in companies in other countries. Now, if you are a patriot of the United States, you might be worried about that. If you love human beings all over the world, then you realize that over time, that kind of helps everybody else, and it brings up a rising tide that lifts all boats. Either way, though, if you are going to say America first, then you got to close the corporate loopholes. And who wanted to close the corporate loopholes? Bernie Sanders. Yeah, he wanted to make sure the corporations keep their money in the country. And Donald Trump wants to make sure that the corporations keep the jobs in the country, which means people keep working and making the money. But what about those corporate loopholes, Donald? I thought you were going to copy Bernie's policies. Come on. I'd like to see those corporate loopholes closed, like the one you mentioned in the debate.
Ben, I'll let you respond to that.
Yeah, one more quick point, and then I'll be done with this because we can do healthcare for 8 hours here. But two things. One, I'd like to...
Props to the moderator. It's been like 21 minutes, and it's been way longer than that in my commentary. So thank you for saying that. Yeah, we're going to move on.
Which tax deduction, when people say tax loopholes, a tax loophole is just a tax deduction that's available to everyone, and some people take advantage of it and some people don't. I can't take advantage of certain corporate tax deductions because my business isn't in those businesses, for example.
Yeah, well, guess what? Their lobbyists made sure that those deductions are available for them. So yeah, it might be theoretically available for everybody, but like you say, Ben, only they get to benefit from this. And look at the top companies with the top cash stashes in the world. Yeah? What are they investing that cash in? Where are the taxes going?
Example. I'm sort of with you in the sense that I'm not in favor of tax deductions. I'm in favor of a lower tax rate and get rid of a lot of the tax deductions because I think that it's ridiculous that we have people gaming the system.
Yes, I think I, again, appreciate that Ben agreed with Cenk. There's got to be more of this agreement because at the end of the day, you guys are smart guys. And even though you may start out on different sides of an issue, I think the idea of a debate, ideally, is to discuss, to find common ground and agreement and see where you disagree and find that point and identify where it is for the public that you guys really disagree on. And then people can make up their own minds. So thank you for sort of highlighting that there are points of agreement here.
That said, I'd like to know which tax deductions you'd like to do away with. And I'd like to know also when you say that corporations pay 10% of the taxes, right, and individuals pay the other 90%, okay, so that means the taxes are still getting paid to a higher rate than we ever have in our history in terms of the tax revenue to the government. The amount of tax revenue to the government right now is trillions of dollars every...
Okay, so he's sort of shifting over here. Cenk basically said corporations used to pay a far larger share of the tax, the overall taxes raised, than they do today. It's now down to 10% from 30%. Ben is sort of, okay, well, he started answering it, but then he kind of shifts to, well, we now raise a lot more money in taxes than we ever did, so maybe it's just a wash.
Here. And final point here. You elided this question by saying we can learn stuff from Japan. The standard of care is the entire question when it comes to single-payer health care. That is the entire thing.
Thank you, by the way, again. He's drawing a line in the sand and clarifying, like, we are not talking about prices. And that's important because this whole time I've been saying single-payer costs less. So now he's going to dig kind of have a trench that he's going to die in or fight in. And he's going to say, look, you're willing to die in this trench that there's just higher quality of healthcare on this side, right, of the Atlantic or whatever. And maybe when it comes to Canada and waiting times, that's true. And there's always these articles cherry-picking waiting times in the NHS, National Health Service of Britain, but it's just been voted number one in several polls where the United States is not near number one at all. So waiting times in the United States, by the way, much worse than in Britain, okay? And that's not including the infinite wait times where people don't even just go to the doctor at all. Okay, those are wait times too, but we're not even counting those. Just out of the wait times that you experience and your neighbors experience with regular private health insurance, you wait to see a doctor on average longer than they do in Britain. The poster child for like wait lines, death panels, and all this stuff, which is just fear mongering mostly.
People felt like they were going to get the same access to care in a single-payer healthcare system as they did in a system where they can pay their own way, then we would have no controversy here. But the fact is that rationing is mandated as soon as you start having the government run the healthcare system and decide what level of care people get.
No, it's not mandated because on top of it, you can still pay your way. It's just that people get the minimum and everybody can have the running water. Hey, Ben, why don't we just make sure that running water is not a right and then we can have more of it, right? And some people will not have it, but overall we'll have more of it. That argument is an ideological argument. It doesn't always work. And how is it, again, that other countries are able to do this? Anyway, he's not going to answer that.
I don't want anyone deciding what level of care that I can get. I don't want anyone else they don't care about me. They don't know my child's name. They don't know my name. All they know is how much I cost.
Yeah, by the way, you make a lot more money than a person that will actually care about someone deciding what level of care they get. Because you're thinking, I don't want somebody deciding level of care I get because I'm going to get less level of care than I would have otherwise. If you had nothing and Medicaid was the way that you got health care, then guess what? The level of care you got was zero unless you had Medicaid. So you wouldn't be thinking this way. You'd be thinking, yeah, I wish somebody would actually dictate the level of care that I get because it would be higher than what I otherwise get, which is pretty much zero.
I mean, Ezekiel Emanuel's at least honest about this. Ezekiel Emanuel comes out and says, listen, I want to die at 70, right? I want to die at 80. That's fine with me. I'd rather die at that. Well, that's good for him. But if I don't want to die at 80 or I don't want my father to die at 80, it's none of his damn business.
Yeah, and that's an obscure reference, and that was pretty nice, fun article to read that a guy is talking about, hey, I don't want to die, I don't want to live after I get all these diseases and you get palliative care and you got all this stuff, I get it. Not many people get this reference, but yeah, Ben has valid points that, look, when you have central planners and they make the decision as to whether to keep older people on life support past 80 and 90 or whatever, if they're in failing health, that's where actually most of the money goes. And there's a trade-off and there's a slippery slope argument there. And he's right about that. But so he's just going to give up and give it to the market. He's just going to let the market decide. And look, again, you can have the market decide. You can pay your way as long as everybody else first gets to live. And then on top of that, yeah, if you're a rich 80-year-old and you want to just make sure they keep you alive as long as possible, you could certainly do that. Certainly. That's actually your system, Ben, right? Okay.
So when you say tax revenue is that...
I don't like how he says. So, let me see. It's my turn. Oh, I'm going to write something down. All right, so. Yeah, I don't like how he begins everything with so. That's a little bit of a minus for this guy.
At its highest point. Now, you know that that's misleading because everything economically is at its highest point, meaning that we have a lot more people in the country than we did in the 1950s and 60s, so hence we are collecting more overall taxes. But
we have more people. There's more technology. We have more productivity per person. It's like 10 times more than in the 50s or something. And by the way, with all this more productivity, how come today it takes two people to run a household and they both work and they put their kids in public school and they put their parents in the nursing homes and they just work. For what? And in the 50s, one person could be the breadwinner for the whole family. And one of the parents actually, looked after the kids. So how is it possible that we're more productive today, 10 times more, but the inequality is so high that you can't afford to pay the rent? How is it that the rent relative to wages has increased so much? Automation. But anyway.
The reality is, as
economy.
A percentage, it is clearly down. The top bracket now is around 39%. It used to be at 91%. That's inarguable, right?
But our economy is significantly larger than it was then, and part of...
See how Cenk is like, that's inarguable, right? He just wants him to say yes. And when he says something else, Cenk listens like, what? What are you talking about right now? And Ben just makes another point.
That is because of reductions in taxes over previous decades.
Well, we...
Ideological point. So it's because of the reductions in taxes that we had this boom. But Ben, didn't you just say that it's because all the other countries were bombed out, that we had all this prosperity? Could it be that? Could it be that we have more technology today and people invented computers? People invented cell phones and iPhones. People invented all this stuff on the World Wide Web that you're using right now, like YouTube. I mean, could that also have contributed possibly to the wealth in the country? I mean, I think you guys would both agree that yes.
We tried supply side economics.
Hey,
Kansas, how's that working out for you? So there's this myth that
Trickle-Down Economics, how's that working out for you? Ben throws a zinger.
For you, your business is doing great.
Okay, yeah. Well, we just had 8 years of Obama.
Okay. The real answer should be, well, we're kind of rich guys up here, and we don't actually know what it's like anymore to be trying to live month to month and put food on the table for your kids.
So the tax rate is clearly lower for the richest people in the country. It is clearly lower for corporations, in effect. It is, and so to say that it's a record collection is misleading. So in terms of the healthcare and how that relates to the government, by the way, on one more thing on taxes, you said, name me a tax loophole. Mm-hmm. So yes, there are plenty of those. For example, they hide their money offshore. They do tricks like the double Dutch and the Irish sandwich or the reverse.
I like that he knows these off the top of his head. I don't think he has a laptop in his podium, so that's pretty cool. I think he talks about them on his show. Again, this is the quality that you want to come for. Debaters that can actually pull this stuff like, oh, which loopholes would you cover? If this was Donald Trump versus Hillary, it would be like, which loopholes? Well, there's the carried interest tax deduction. Yeah, that one. That's what I would do. That's it. That's the one. Okay, I'm done. Yeah, and Cenk is like, yeah, there's the double Dutch, there's the Irish sandwich. Like, he actually knows the names of these, and he's not going to say, look, Apple does it, Google does it, because he doesn't want to make enemies. He doesn't want to say, like, these companies, right? These are the companies that are not paying any taxes, guys. He's just naming the schemes. But really, look at the top companies on the stock market. Are they paying taxes into the system? And if not, why not? And can we change that?
And I would end that. I would say, hey, you know what? We've got a 35% rate. Here's the new rule. You're going to pay 35%, okay? And you're not allowed to hide your money. I don't care if it's in the Cayman Islands.
I cheer for that.
We're going to make that illegal, Mitt Romney. We're going to make it illegal, okay?
All right, so he supports Barack Obama and he's against Mitt Romney. And he kind of throws that in there as well. It's kind of like Ben Shapiro throwing in there's rations, you know. But I guess this being a political debate, he's basically saying, look, Mitt Romney bad, Obama good. And, you do have to give props to a guy that the markets didn't tank under him. The job markets didn't tank under him. Stock market went up, job market went up, Detroit was saved, and so forth. Could he have done better with less taxes? Maybe. I don't know, whatever. But Obama was basically a centrist, and he steered the ship pretty well. Now, can a president take credit for everything? No, but you can't blame him for, destroying the economy.
And so then every once in a while they do a tax holiday. Well, that must be nice. You remember when you got a tax holiday? I don't remember getting a tax holiday. No, that's only for corporations who bribe politicians. So they brought that rate down from 35% to 5%. And they said they were going to create more jobs. Color me surprised when it turns out they didn't. They offshored taxes. They took that 30% extra, put it in their pocket, gave it to their executives, and created no new jobs.
Yeah, well, I mean, you can go to the data and look. Yeah, actually, Cenk is right here.
Because that's how it works if you just trust corporations to do the right thing. Corporations are not evil. They just want to maximize profit. This
is important to say, by the way. Yeah, it's about incentives. These people are not scheming, like on The Simpsons. Excellent. We are going to just rob everybody of their money, and we are going to shoot down all the animals and cut down all the trees so there is no more vegetation and there are no more bees, and then everybody will starve. And then we're going to just have all the carbon in the atmosphere, and we're going to have a giant freaking mirror and laser, and we're going to, now I'm Dr. Evil. All right, well, no, these are not corporations.
That's what they're built for.
Mr. Smithers, I remembered his name now. Excellent.
So So please don't be naive and be like, no, but the corporations will look out for our interests. No, they look out for their bottom line.
I mean,
and finally, just last quick thing,
Sure.
Medicare Advantage. You keep saying rationing health.
I like that Cenk makes things simple, and he basically deals with the facts. He's not always right, but in this debate so far, I'm giving it to him. Now, you could tell I'm a little biased coming in here, but I'm a big fan of Ben Shapiro too. I just think that he's very ideological, and you need, in these debates, to convince someone like me to talk about facts and how your ideology is explained by facts.
Healthcare. But Medicare gives you the bare minimum, and people seem to be very, very happy about it given how well it polls. But you can do Medicare Advantage and get more. I want you to be able to do that. If you're incredibly rich and you want every kind of treatment, I don't want to deny that to you. Get Medicare Advantage.
I like that he makes things very clear. I mean, do you object to the fact that you can get anything you want if you can pay for it, but everybody else also gets to not die? Do you have a problem with the fact that everybody else gets to not die because they live in the 21st century where we have all this wealth and we can do it?
So Ben, let me just ask,
The problem is when you
respond to that too.
The problem is when you pay a higher tax rate throughout the course of your life to pay for all of the Medicare that you are talking about, you don't have enough money to pay for Medicare Advantage in many cases. And as far as this idea that,
Wait a second, Ben. So basically, if you're poor in the end, too poor to pay for Medicare Advantage, that's really bad and you don't want that situation. But only if you're too poor because you've paid the taxes. If you're too poor for any other reason, though, then, well, then you're on your own. I don't get that.
corporations they don't have any of your interests at heart. You are a corporation. TYT's it's a corporation. You have 80 employees. I assume that you're not just a greedy asshole, and that you actually would like to help your employees from time to time. And you just talked about.
So I like what Ben did here. He basically, he said he gave a compliment to his debate partner and said, "Look, I know you. I imagine you're not a greedy asshole." And he's like, "Yeah, I agree with that." And nobody will disagree with that. And he says, "Look, you run a corporation, right? It's probably maybe it's an LLC. I don't know. But the Young Turks, and notice he could have made a straw man argument. He could have said, you care about your viewers and you provide a service to people, and corporations want to help consumers." And then Cenk would clarify that, wait, consumers are the one hand, but what about on the other hand, producers and the people being laid off, like Uber drivers being laid off when Uber gets self-driving cars? What about that? Or McDonald's workers getting laid off when you can automate, with the kiosks, and you can automate the food production. Like, what about that? But Ben doesn't go there. He actually addresses it properly. He says, well, you're a corporation and you are paying your workers, so aren't you trickling down the money? And that's a fair point. Let's see what Cenk says to that.
How under Obama, everything got better with your business. Well, under Obama, he didn't radically escalate taxes. Okay, there was not a radical escalation of taxes under President.
Exactly. He's pretty much a centrist, which is why, I respect Ben for not attacking Obama as much as every rabid attacking dog on the right attacked Obama for 8 years, and is now surprised why CNN is attacking Trump.
President Obama. And finally, when you seem to be identifying a higher tax rate in the 1950s with higher level of growth. So if that's the case, why not just tax everybody at 100% and we can have massive growth from here to eternity?
Strong man. But, it really sounds good. It's like, yo, socialist, why don't we just take your system to its logical conclusion and just tax everybody 100%? Nobody will have any money, and everybody will be in debt all the time.
Because, let me just ask, since we're talking about taxes, do you think we'll see tax reform in the...
Yeah, I'm sure there's going to be videos where, like, Ben Shapiro destroys Cenk Uygur. Boom, boom, boom. And he got this, sunglasses, and he's just smoking the cigarette. It's like, boom, rap music. But, okay, here's the thing, gangsta. The thing is, I forgot what I was going to say.
In the next few months here?
Okay, so let me try to address all that in your question.
Oh, yeah, I remember what I was going to say. So why not tax it 100%? So Art Laffer, remember I mentioned him before, he had the Laffer curve. And basically the curve was to discover how much revenue will the government raise depending on the tax level. At zero tax level, the government raises zero, okay? And on the Laffer curve, they basically assume that at 100% tax level, the government also gets around zero because no one wants to work and give all their money to the government. So somewhere in the middle is a maximum, okay? Mathematics, there's a continuous curve, and they want to find the maximum. They calculated somehow that the maximum is around 60%. which means you can tax up to 60%, and that's where you get the maximum government revenues. That may not be good for the economy, but that's the maximum you're going to get for the government. We are nowhere near 60% per capita. And with corporations, we are nowhere near even 30% with this. Like basically Cenk is talking about. Corporations are actually paying even less into the system than they used to.
Question as well. So just real quick, look, guys, I said it however many questions ago. Of course, you have to find the right balance on all of these issues, including taxes.
Which Art Laffer and even Reagan would agree with. Nobody thinks that zero. I could ask Ben Shapiro the same thing. Do you think zero taxes is the best thing? Hey, if you think that taxes are stealing, why not just eliminate all the theft and just go into a libertarian paradise and eliminate government with zero taxes? I mean, the early American government was entirely funded with tariffs. Maybe we should go that route. And frankly, with all the protectionism right now in the Trump administration, we might have more tariffs, and maybe we can fund the government that way. Anyway, that's how we're going to pay for the wall, probably, is the American taxpayers just going to pay more for stuff coming out of Mexico. So we're going to pay for the wall. It better be a nice wall.
So I never said there's no end to how much you could.
I'm just asking
pay.
why, though.
Yeah. So
Why what? Why not raise to 100? Well, why not lower to zero?
This leads to wait a minute. This leads to big government versus small government. You're asking me what the ideal.
I wish he would just say. He didn't realize to say. I mean, in the moment. Hey Ben, if taxes are theft, why don't you just eliminate all of the theft and just have zero taxes and go back to running the government off of tariffs?
Tax rate is, and then you did a straw man there for a second and said it should be 100%. I never said that.
No.
In fact, I said.
No, you said the economy.
What's with the booze?
Let me understand.
You said the economy grew faster when the top marginal tax rate was 91%. So I'm asking you, why shouldn't the top tax rate or all tax rates be 91%?
Okay, this is really a little bit frustrating because no one said this, and neither side, remember, really proved anything with these taxes. So Cenk didn't argue that 91% top nominal tax rate is the thing that causes prosperity. Okay, he didn't say that, so there's a straw man. And also Ben did not say that 91% taxes, I think, destroy prosperity. So neither, there's these other factors that they mentioned, that prosperity came from other things. But the 91% taxes didn't hurt their prosperity to the point to destroy it. So unless now things have changed, perhaps similar tax rates could work. But no one's even talking about even 91% tax. He just made that kind of question because so Ben, remember, started this by asking what tax rate you're going to have. So that maybe that was the whole thing where he's getting back to it and kind of trying to trap Cenk and put him into a corner with straw men that he himself facilitated with his questions, with leading questions like, well, what tax rate do you want?
You seem to be identifying a higher rate of growth with higher taxation. So I'm asking you, on principle, you keep talking about the glories of a mixed economy.
So this is a little bit of a trick. So earlier in the debate, Ben says, okay, central planner, what tax rate would you want? And as an aside, who would you treat among 80-year-olds and 90-year-olds? So he's basically saying, okay, fair point, central planning is not going to be perfect. It's not going to have solutions for everybody. In fact, it could be disastrous. That's a fair point. But then when Cenk answers his question by going back to the 50s and saying, look, a 91% tax rate was in effect and it didn't kill things, he's not arguing that that is what caused the prosperity. So he's kind of answering a trap question, and now Ben's about to trap him further.
But now tell me about the glories of capital. I've heard about the glories of high tax rates. I've heard about the glories of government-provided health care.
No, he's not heard the glories of high tax rates. He's heard the glories of eliminating corporate loopholes, which he agrees with. But for the show, he has to misinterpret what Cenk said.
Now tell me some of the glories of actual capitalism, which is the basis for all the things you're talking. Tell me why it's good.
Right. So now...
I hope he does, because he actually agrees with capitalism, right?
Look, when you... I use the example of the 91% and 70% to give you a sense of that I was surprised and you'd be surprised.
Ooh, wow, burn. So Ben actually kind of starts owning him in the debate, but not on the substance. But look what he did. Okay, so he's basically misinterpreted, so Cenk now has to explain himself. But by explaining himself, he has a choice. He can either explain himself Or he could start talking about how he supports capitalism, right? And if he explains himself, it appears as if he doesn't support capitalism, so he's kind of like leaving that unsaid, and that means something. But it doesn't. He just has to pick one or the other because he has one mouth. So that, yeah, it's kind of a powerful debate tactic there, Ben.
To find out that our economy was booming in those times. That's not to say that that is the right tax rate for us today. And so the exercise of finding the right tax rate is...
Look, there's the mixed booze and there's the mix, I don't know, but he's clearly reacting to it now. So Ben, yeah, okay, debate props for debate technique. Again, you don't win points with me, but you obviously win more points with the crowd now.
Guys, try to follow along, okay? It's called
oh my goodness.
logic.
Do not insult the audience. Deplorables, basket of deplorables in the audience. Oh, and then you wonder why Hillary lost.
So
you don't insult the fans.
It would be preposterous to set the tax rate at 0.
All right, so now it's what, 28? Oh, I think it's going to get worse for him now. I think this is a turning point. I'm guessing. I didn't watch the rest yet. Let's see.
It would be preposterous to set it at 100%.
So why couldn't you just, instead of that, instead of, okay, sidebar about debate technique, okay? You don't just feed the answers to your opponent. You don't say it's preposterous to set it at 0 and it's preposterous to set it at 100. If they go into jujitsu mode of like, okay, throwing two things at once at you and then like you get boozed and then you lash out at the audience, which basically he kind of used you against yourself, okay? So Ben is using jujitsu. Get it? Jujitsu? Okay. I'm Jewish too. I could say it. Look, okay, so Ben's doing this. The right thing in general in debates, here's a trick. If you're ever debating, let your opponent answer it. So you say, okay, Ben, well, fair point. Why don't I ask you if you think taxes are so bad? Why don't we just put them to 0? Same question. That's a lot more powerful. That's like when Donald Trump is asked, hey, what do you prefer among the nuclear triad? And then he says, well, Iraq, we shouldn't have gone into Iraq. You need someone you can trust. Nuclear is very important. Nuclear, yeah, it's like very powerful and important. And believe me, like you got to trust. You can always trust me. And then if you're his debate, like, opponent, right? The thing you should not say is, hey, Donald, this is what hey, audience, let me just tell everybody what the nuclear triad is. Because when you say that, people just think, okay, well, I didn't know what the nuclear triad is, but I guess Donald Trump did. And now you caught me up to speed. Thanks. Yeah, Donald Trump didn't know what the nuclear triad meant. And what you should do is ask him a simple question. Okay, hey, just a quick question, Donald. What is the nuclear triad? And then just shut up and let him answer the question, right? Because when he can't answer that question, then it shows that he's been bullshitting the audience for the last, 2-3 minutes. It's about psychology. So nobody likes to be bullshitted, and no one likes to be berated. It's called logic. Facepalm. Okay, so in the debate, you don't feed the answers to your opponent by saying, let me explain to the audience what it means. When you have a guest on a show, when you're discussing things and you're being helpful, that's what you do. So here, Cenk should have asked about, this, or like when Donald Trump, for example, is in an interview, and he talks about how Andrew Jackson could have stopped the Civil War, if he was, he saw what was coming and he didn't like it. And so if for some reason, now an interviewer necessarily shouldn't do this, but if this was a debate, if the interviewer was debating him and it was a debate guy, he would say, well, Donald, when do you think Andrew Jackson lived? Right? And then he would have to say, I think in the 30s and the 40s. And that would highlight right away that the premise of his thing was wrong. So, again, debate technique, Ben is way better than Cenk at the debate technique. Cenk is just straightforward answering questions. He's going to lose.
So what we have to do as a society is figure out where we can maximize the most amount of good for the country.
Should it be closer to 0 or closer to 100?
Government, but not too much.
Okay, fair question. Is it closer to 0 or closer to 100? Ben, what do you think?
away from us. So
turn it around and ask him.
for example, the reason why when taxes are higher, it winds up being better for the economy is...
By the way, someone like me, though, I kind of see through this, and I like that he's answering the questions. I understand that he was thrown 2 questions at once, and then he did all this stuff. I don't like that he lashed out at the audience, but I like that he's answering the questions. But that doesn't work for most people in a debate, because the crowd psychology is going to be like someone's going to start booing, and then other people are going to get the impression, and other people are going to start booing. It's going to be a whole thing.
Is because it recirculates the money. So if you give it to the rich, this is hilarious.
You see what I mean? That's it. That's it. He just he squandered the goodwill. I mean, he's Hillary right now for some people.
You're uneducated. Please, at least don't.
Oh, this is so painful. I think this may be the point at which Dave Rubin starts tweeting. Like, I feel sorry for Cenk.
Make it obvious.
Look, even if there's a large basket of deplorables somewhere in the right wing of this auditorium, after which they're named, I'm kidding, please do not address them, because the other people might think, hey, if he's after them, maybe he's kind of more of a penis head than I thought. Not the way you want to go, Cenk, but then again, I guess you took the bait.
The most interesting conversation on taxes I've heard.
If you don't know the concept of recirculation of money, then go look it up.
Go look it up. Yeah, a lot of people don't know that concept.
And so the way that it works is that when the middle class...
Let's have some capitalism right now.
You own the details. Master the presentation.
It's actually very, very, very appropriate for Cenk right now. Thank you, commercial.
Has more money, disposable income. They spend it. Why? Because they're not living the lap of luxury. They're not saving it for their yacht. So they need to buy food for their family. They need education for their family. So they...
This is called marginal propensity to spend. You can look it up on Wikipedia right here. Marginal propensity to consume. Okay. Basically, if you make $20,000 a year, more of those $20,000 are going to go for things like food and housing. You know why? Because you actually need those things. So they're going to go towards what's called necessary goods. All right? Necessary goods are those goods, this is an economic term, that when your income goes down, your proportion of those goods buying goes up. Okay? So people with higher incomes buy less necessary goods. They buy things like Rolex watches, which they don't really need, or like vacations to Tahiti, which they can survive without. But everyone buys the necessary goods. It's just that when you make more money, you can buy more surplus goods. You didn't have to attack the audience, Cenk. Yeah, Ben kind of owns you right now.
Spend it and it goes back into the economy. If you just give it in supply side economics to the rich and hope that it trickles down on us eventually decades later, what they wind up doing with it is something that is logical. They save it. But that means it does not recirculate in the economy. And that is why...
Partly true. They save it in a bank, and that bank has fractional reserve lending. That bank is then able to keep some of the money on reserve and lend out the rest. Some of that money is actually created as credit by the bank. And that's new money. It's not money issued by the government. It's actually credit money issued by the bank. And it's money because your store will accept it. Your credit cards, Visa, etc., are payment processing networks. In China, they have apps now, like WePay and Alipay, instead of these credit card networks. But either way, the banks issue the credit, and they issue the credit to certain people that they feel are credit worthy, and certain businesses that they feel have collateral and they can pay it back. So yeah, actually very little money that's stored in banks is not given out. It does trickle down to some extent, but not enough to prevent wealth inequality. I disagree with Cenk in that, I don't think wealth inequality is only a result of trickle-down economics. The growing inequality that you see with Piketty and other authors, it is also due to automation and outsourcing of jobs. the more you have technology, you can automate things. You've automated kiosks at airports. No longer do you need to see a person. You could just, put your passport there. You have ATMs at banks. You will soon have self-driving cars. You'll soon automate cooking at McDonald's and the cashiers and all that stuff. I'm sorry, but where are all those people going to go? The aggregate demand for human labor locally, it's going to go down. Not for all sectors and all types of jobs, but some. And those people will then educate themselves and become lawyers or accountants or whatever. And then the lawyers will have more supply and less and the same demand. So their jobs, wages will go down and so forth. This process of automation depresses wages for regular people, for humans. Because when you can hire one person and 10 computers instead of having, let's say, 50 people, then you'll do that. So that is not just trickle-down economics is a huge factor in why wages are going down. Even if you have no trickle-down economics, you will still have a lot of unemployed people and wages going down relative to rent. And that is why you'll have households where both people have to work just to pay the rent and live the same kind of lifestyle that people used to live before. Because the rent, there's only so much real estate. But the wages locally are going down relative to the price of real estate.
When you have lower taxes, ironically, the economy does worse. But of course, it's a balancing act.
Okay, I'm sorry. I kind of talked about my own things. Let's talk about what Cenk just said. He actually educated the audience. He's just a penis head about it. But he has said, basically, look, people, if you put more money in the pockets of ordinary people, they're going to go out and spend that money. They're going to go to the pharmacy and buy the pharmacology and the drugs that they need, let's say, to take care of their upset stomach. They're going to buy better food and have better public health and whatever. They're going to buy Gillette razors. Okay, I mentioned Gillette, so I better put you as a sponsor here now. So they're going to buy razors, and then those companies like Gillette are going to hire more people, right? Except, like I said, eventually they're going to just ramp up the machines and the computers, like you see in Detroit. There's not many more people making cars anymore, even if there's more demand for cars. So, yeah, it only goes so far, but Cenk is right, that if there were no robots and computers and automation, then yeah, when you have larger taxes and more wealth redistribution, you actually can have a better economy. Of course, if you redistribute 100% of the wealth, you have a worse economy. And if you redistribute 0% of the wealth, you might have a worse economy. Because all those people who are struggling day to day to get by in a dead-end job that will get automated away anyway, right? Like, let's say, a horse carriage driver in the 1910s, right? Those people could have been doing something else. They could have gone to school and actually become productive sooner. But they're struggling, and they keep this balancing act of, like, gotta pay the rent, gotta make the money, doing crappy things, and that's an inefficiency, actually, in the economy. So, Cenk is right, but what are you going to do? He lost.
So now you're making a strong case for Keynesian economics, which is totally fine, obviously. The problem with Keynesian economics is that it doesn't even work in theory because, again, once you go to the logical extreme, which is remove all of the money from the rich people who are saving all their money and give it to all the poor people to buy hamburgers, that doesn't help the economy or spur the economy. What spurs the economy
are they going to cheer for this?
Is a higher level...
Right. Okay. So, wow, they got booze on both sides. Kind of surprising. I thought Ben would just lock this up, But Ben kind of also messed it up by basically attacking all the non-job creators, a.k.a. people that don't make a lot of money. Basically, they're just, freeloaders, the 47%. Here's a hint. Don't attack 47% of Americans. Don't attack the audience. This guy, I think he's enjoying this. He's like, what is going on?
What spurs the economy is the creation of new products.
He was about to say something.
and services, and that is only going to be done by people who have expendable capital to actually invest in the new products and services that we all enjoy. This is what creates economic growth.
All right, thank you, right-wingers. You love this part.
It's also worth noting that this myth that spending is inherently better for an economy than saving, that's only true if you're talking about somebody who's actually taking the cash and just shoving it into their mattress. Banks are in the business of lending. When they take the money in, they don't just stick it in Al Gore's fake lockbox. They actually lend the money back out to people to actually create new business.
Except for the fake lockbox thing, I completely agree with Ben here. Banks do lend out money. Unfortunately, they didn't lend out a lot after they were bailed out. They didn't increase their lending or anything like that, which, might be a good thing. I mean, lending to people that had no assets and no income and giving them mortgages in the first place is what got us in this mess in the first place with the housing crisis. Maybe it's not forcing banks to lend to anybody that is the solution. Maybe it's giving the money, but not to the banks, just to the people themselves, like unconditional basic income, like single-payer healthcare, where even if you make nothing, you can still save your life, which is currently true already because of the 1985 Korba bill.
Businesses and new products. You had an investor, right? When you started TYT, you were given $4 million by Buddy Roemer to start TYT. That's great. That's the way business should work, right? But that money it didn't come from a bunch of poor people buying hamburgers. It came from a very, very wealthy guy who gave you money to create a business a lot of people want to patronize.
No, it's because he gave you that money because eventually he thought there would be demand. Demand in the form of less well-off people, just masses of people, some of which are well-off and some are not, giving you $5 each, $10 each, right? I have a startup, okay? I have investors. And they funded me to create apps. I create these apps and I put them in the app stores. Then my users, we've had 5 million people download the apps. So the investors, that's what they were counting on. You get the people, download the apps, and then each person spends what? Like 99 cents? They spend $10? But guess what? They wouldn't be spending those $10 on Angry Birds or whatever it was if they didn't have the prosperity, if they couldn't feed their family. I would hope. I mean, maybe some are so addicted to Angry Birds, it was pretty addictive as a game, And some people would spend on other addictions like cigarettes. And that's, and drugs, that's one of the things why people are concerned is because people blow so much money on cocaine and other things like that. But all things being equal, Ben, investors are more likely to invest in your company when you can sell them the story that people will buy your product, right? Who are these people? They're the regular people that are all over the place. And if they had more money, they would spend some of that surplus money on things like your product. Investors don't usually think like, hey, okay, this entrepreneur came with a product. I don't know if there's demand for it, but I did just get a tax break. And I have more money in my bank account. So I just got to put it somewhere. Let me just fund a startup where I don't see the demand happening. No. Ben, the job creators are also the regular people. You just don't see it because it's one step removed. The regular people just go and buy those Gillette razors. So then another razor company can start up. And the investors will invest because they see demand for razors. And maybe this company can take some of Gillette razors' market share or create new market share. Anyway, the point is, Ben, you're wrong about this ideologically, but you're a master at debating, honestly.
If you want better products and better services, you need more investment in the products and services. The basic name, Trickle-Down Economics.
No, one step removed from that. Take one step back. They're going to invest because masses of regular people, I hate to say masses, but you want to have many, many people buy your product, right? That's the thing that investors want to see if they're investing in a startup. If they're investing in a show, in Cenk Uygur's The Young Turks was a startup or a spin-off. Of course, if they're investing in a pizzeria, they want to see people buying the pizza. What people? All kinds of people. So if those people have more money, then that's the previous step to why the investors invest. Okay? So I would have to give the substance to Cenk again on this. Okay, I guess the crowd is kind of split, but there's certainly a lot of cheers. People believe in trickle-down economics, but think one step further back. I just told you what the step is. There's a lot of ideology being sold on both sides, okay? On the left, there's a lot of ideology too. And right-wingers call them social justice warriors, the people that basically also want to ignore some of the facts and just push a specific narrative. That's a pejorative term for people on the left who do this kind of thing. I think if Cenk tells right now at least something of this to Ben, Ben will have to deal with it.
Basic name trickle-down economics is not something that any conservative even proposed. It's a leftist revision of what economics actually is.
Okay, fair enough. Trickle-down economics was called supply-side economics. And it's a pejorative term too, just like social justice warrior, okay, or libtard. Although that one's a little worse.
Because you're not giving me the money. It was my money in the first place, created through voluntary transactions that I had with others. I've not stolen money from anyone, neither.
Okay, this is libertarian speech, and he's borrowing it. He's borrowing libertarian speech. But does he have the cojones to go all the way and be an anarcho-capitalist? No. So then you're kind of stealing something, Ben. You're stealing libertarians' thunder.
Neither have you. And the idea that money has to be forcibly taken from you and handed to somebody at the bottom end of the economic spectrum to somehow jog the economy, that may jog McDonald's, but is not going to jog all of the creation of the products and services that make all of our lives much better today than they were 30 years ago in terms of the stuff we have access to.
But kind of the facts of the story and the data is that the middle class in America has really grown in the 20th century. And this middle class is what's buying all these products. You know, all the products that you saw advertised on TV in the 60s and the 70s, and the pet rocks, and all the actually useful products, right? They were marketed to whom? To people that had the TV, okay? And those people could go out and buy the stuff. And then it's Blockbuster, and then Blockbuster gave way to Netflix, and now you have subscriptions. How can people afford to watch these shows and pay whatever, $8 a month or whatever it is? It's because they have the money to do it. And that's how that trickles down. And frankly, these job creators these days are becoming automated, like Uber, okay, instead of car services. Uber, which is just like one app, and eventually it's going to be decentralized like Bitcoin. There's going to be decentralized marketplaces, and there's going to be robots and autonomous corporations. So who are these job creators that are not going to, they're going to like, oh no, the autonomous corporation says, I'm going to be taxed 90%, screw this. The autonomous corporation has left the building. No, robots don't care. If we're going to have more and more robots in the economy, they're going to be less and less sensitive to tax increases, okay? They don't have, and Steve Jobs and others, they didn't care also about the money and the taxes. Apple's the most valuable company in the world under Steve Jobs, but that's not why he did it. He did it so that everyone could have an iPhone. He did it to put a dent in the universe. And that's why many people do it. That's why I do it. And that's probably why Cenk did it, because he likes to hear himself talk, and so does Ben. That's why you guys do it. You would still do it if your tax rate was probably 90%. And your wife would probably still be a doctor because she loves to save lives, and that's what she's passionate about. Okay? I don't know what kind of doctor she is. Maybe she's not saving lives, but she's certainly improving them as a doctor. And, you know, this whole thing, there's another great TED Talk. What is it called? Basically, motivation. It's autonomy, purpose, and mastery. And it talks about the hidden drive and why people do what they do. And here's a hint. Money is only up to a point. Once you have enough for a comfortable life, you do what you're really passionate about. And I hope we get into a society with robots, whatever, eventually, that people are freed up to do what they're passionate about. Because frankly, nobody will want them to be cashiers or drivers or any one of those things that they do today as a dead-end job. I mean, very few people are actually passionate about being drivers. Some are, Speed Racer is, but he's a fictional character.
Cenk, I'll let you respond to that briefly, and then we'll switch topic.
Yeah. So I'll try to answer that as briefly as I can, and I'll go on to your questions. So
as briefly as I can without insulting the audience, hopefully.
When you talk about, hey, the banks they're not going to just keep the money, they're going to put it out and lend it to people, unless they decided to do their own investments, which is what they did because we repealed Glass-Steagall. So
Thank you.
it's not as simple as, oh, I have money, so then I will now utilize it or I'll lend it out. So that is way oversimplistic. Speaking of oversimplistic,
I just wish he. I like Cenk's substance. I don't like his debate style. He has to throw questions back to Ben. Okay? Hey Ben, what I just said. Why do you think investors invest in companies in the first place? Well, they think they're going to get their money back and make a return. Okay, where's that return coming from? Oh, it's people buying the products that the company's going to make. Oh, who are those people? How do they have all this disposable income? Yeah, I would prefer that more.
To say that, oh, well, they'll go buy hamburgers with it. Come on.
You were the one who said
So
food.
the middle class is struggling right now. And we've turned this into a Walmart economy where people are getting $7.25. And that if you're getting around $10, I think that's about $15,000 a year. So that is serious pain and difficulties. So if you give those people money.
You know what? Look up the Walmart economy. I mean, honestly, Walmart moves in, right? It disrupts all the other grocery stores. They go out of business. So where do the employees go? They got to work for Walmart. So, yeah, it's better for the consumer. But if the consumer is the same person supposed to make the money in the first place, they have to be a producer first. They have to be an employee. So they sell their time for money. Most people, they get a job, they sell their time. That's their resource. Time, their skills. So they're going to sell that time for Walmart. And it's the only employer. And guess what happens? That employer squeezes them and doesn't pay them a lot. Sometimes Walmart, and Bernie Sanders talked about this, the Walton family is one of the richest families, right? But we redistribute wealth to them. Can you imagine this? We redistribute wealth to the Walton family with public money. Here's how we do it. The Waltons can pay people below the living wage. Like the minimum wage they pay, but it's not enough to live on. And people can go to the local government and state government and get Medicaid, and they can get all the social assistance. So we, the public, through the federal government subsidies to the states, and through their state, the state citizens of that state, they have to subsidize Walmart. Because Walmart doesn't pay their employees what, I guess they pay the market price in the sense that someone's willing to work for them. But not enough for those people to get enough for what is today considered the minimum lifestyle, like rent, healthcare, etc. They are living under the poverty line, even though they're making minimum wage. And so because the minimum wage is not indexed to inflation, long ago it's not become a living wage anymore. Anyway, the bottom line is that the more robots and automation you have, the less the employers need the employees. Like Amazon will eventually lay off a lot of its workers and replace them with Kiva robots and robots that can actually pick from the shelves. You don't need as many workers if you have the robots doing a lot of the automated work for you. And the same thing with Walmart. And if people don't even go to Walmart and stay at home, then Amazon can just have delivery people do all the work. And eventually the delivery trucks will be automated too, etc., etc. Yeah, this is a thing. And this is what no one talks about. When they say we're going to bring the jobs back to America, that's the wrong... They're not going to bring the manufacturing jobs back. Maybe for the next 10 years they will. But eventually the AI, okay, and the outsourcing will make those jobs pay less and less and less relative to inflation. Which means people will just be in a giant hamster wheel trying to pay the rent. And that's not sustainable over the long term. But that's not something either of these guys talk about. So
it's not like, I just want to go get a hamburger.
No, they
desperately need that money, and they will spend it all back into the economy. So that's an economic fact. And so...
he turned it around. This whole thing when he was talking and people are booing him, and he finally drove it home and people are like, cheer!
And for the 88th time, we have to find a balance where you have provided an incentive for people to save and invest, and you have provided an incentive for people to be able to put money back into the economy and to be able to live. And taxes is not stealing from you. So you're right, I run a business. So in order for my employees to get to my company, you know what they have to do? They have to drive on roads. Okay, so it's not stealing from me to build that road. That helps my business. They had to go to school. The fact that they went to public school.
just as an aside, yeah, there's a lot of facts to back this up. It's not an ideology necessarily. Now, there could be private roads, and Walter Block and, Murray Rothbard and all the anarcho-capitalists could say, look, maybe you can have private roads. I've covered that already. A road is kind of a natural monopoly because you can't have 100 roads competing in the same place, etc., etc. However, look at the interstate highway system, one of the biggest government projects. One of the things, along with the New Deal, that helped raise the American economy, put people back to work. Kind of like the $1 trillion infrastructure plan, right, that Bernie kind of pioneered and Donald Trump gave lip service to and hopefully will do. It puts people back to work, but it does more than that. That infrastructure is then used, and McDonald's and all these franchises and all these supermarkets spring up alongside these roads. And then you have the suburbs that start being built out around the cities. There are downsides, of course, and parts of cities experience more inequality when the highway has to go through that part of the city. But overall, a lot of business is built up around that. For example, here we have the internet and we have the web. How much has been built? Here's Google, okay, one of the most valuable companies in the world. Apple, this is an Apple laptop. You got WeChat, we got Tencent in China, the most valuable company in the world. They're all Alibaba. The reason that Yahoo even had a price above $1, I'm exaggerating. These are all technology companies. So how did this technology take off? Well, the internet. And part of the internet was the DARPA project. Now, the internet could have come about without it. But even Silicon Valley was built up by government money. If you ever look at The Secret History of Silicon Valley by Steve Blank, I saw him give a talk about this. Microwave research in World War II. Okay, it funded the first companies in the Valley. Then you had Xerox PARC. That was not government funded. But the point is, Stanford University, all those grants, and all those graduates that built all those companies, and then gave the check to Google and Larry Page and Sergey Brin, and all that stuff, and then the computers that you use today, and the microchip, and Intel, okay, they got government money. So, yeah, like the internet and technology and infrastructure is a good investment. You may argue that the private market could have done it even better. But this is pretty good, I would say. These are platforms that have created a lot of wealth, so you do get a lot of investment back.
Tools allows them to work for me. All these things are things that I benefit from. I didn't build that company by myself. Every single person that works there helped me to build that company.
He says this about his own company, TYT, which is respect.
And that's what it means to work together. So
I want to see Ben Shapiro say, you know what, the Daily Wire, I want to give a shout out to all the people that work there, because without you, I couldn't have made it happen either. Truth is, he probably could. Those people are probably as good as other people that he could have hired. And maybe he's just also lucky and in the right place at the right time in his career to launch it. There's a lot of luck. And frankly, Ben, you're religious, so you know that like Hashem actually controls the world. And a lot of these things, when you say, I did it, right, you realize that you kind of didn't, and there's other larger forces at work here. So either way you want to look at it, divine providence, serendipity, or the fact that we live in a society with other people. The fact is, no man is an island. So, yeah, you made that. But while you were making that, you were doing all these other things and relying on all these other people, okay?
To answer Steve's question finally, look, what is this Congress going to do on tax reform? And Ben and I disagree on this too, because we just talked about it a second ago. And this is just political prognostication, but I think that the Republicans will definitely pass tax reform. And the reason I say that is because the Republican Party at this point is completely dependent on their donors. And by the way, don't get me wrong, the Democratic Party is also largely dependent on their donors. I think the Republicans are a tiny bit more corrupt. But so I think that their donors are going to demand those tax cuts. And if I am right, and we'll all see this,
I mean, this is his thing, Wolfpack and all these super PACs, and he wants to get rid of the super PACs and the donors. I mean, he's like the man for this topic. Like, he loves to talk about it.
Because it's something that's going to happen later, not something that has happened. They will do everything. They will move mountains to make sure that those rich donors and corporations will get their tax cuts.
Okay.
And you know what? He's kind of right. And Ben kind of agrees with that. But let's see if he says, hey, you know what? I agree with you. Ron Paul would. Let's see if he does.
So this is an interesting case where I say to Cenk's prognostication from his mouth to God's ears, and he says about mine from my mouth to God's ears, because I don't think they're going to pass anything. Because I think...
I love it. Wait, did he just agree? Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Cenk. You guys are awesome.
that there's a high level incompetence inside the Republican caucus, and it's pretty fractious. But I do want to go back to a couple of points, because you actually hit on some major...
You guys have my vote.
Points. You talked about roads and the fact that we need roads in order to get to work. This is a point Elizabeth Warren made, and obviously a point that President Obama made at the time. I don't think anyone argues that we don't need roads to get to work. The problem is that when you're talking about roads as a percentage of the budget, we are talking about a tiny, tiny, tiny percentage of the federal budget and of the state budget and even of the local budget.
Frankly, the $1 trillion plan to rebuild our crumbling roads and infrastructure is a $1 trillion plan. And as such, it would be a pretty sizable size of the budget. But if we actually were serious about the roads, I don't know. Some of the roads are pretty good, but I'm not an expert on if they're crumbling or not.
So the idea that you're justifying massive tax rates on corporations in order to pay for roads is just intellectually dishonest. It's a tiny the stuff that we agree on, that government should spend on, is a tiny percentage of spending, right? It's all the other stuff that we disagree on.
Oh, come on, take it. You agree on a lot more than that. You agree on closing corporate loopholes. Why don't you get back to Ben and be like, okay, do you agree with closing double Dutch and all these loopholes? And let him either know what the double Dutch is or lose debate points by not knowing it.
As far as the idea that I'm somehow being, dismissive toward people who are buying hamburgers, I'm not. I'm saying the people who are poor need to buy hamburgers to feed their children. They don't have the money to invest in building an iPhone because when
he's using hamburgers as a real example of, feeding your children. So when Cenk said, "Oh, you're not going to buy a hamburger, you're going to buy something you really need," he didn't understand. Ben actually meant you need the hamburger.
You're just trying to get by, and you are living in a Walmart subsistence economy. You're using that money to buy the products and services you need to get by. That does not create new products and services that become cheaper over time through competition.
Yes, it does, because people need stuff, and you can make stuff cheaper that they need, okay? I believe, and maybe I'm wrong about this, but you should first make sure that people get their needs met before you have their wants met. And if people are starving, but hey, iPhones are getting cheaper, I don't know. I think malnutrition may be a bigger deal. Public health may be a bigger deal than like the next iPhone. You already have a nice iPhone. I could be wrong. Listen, I'm just saying I value people's lives over luxury goods. But I think a lot of people are like that. They think like I do because if you look at the polling, Medicare is pretty popular.
You need somebody to make those investments. You said this about Glass-Steagall, for example. You said the banks, they might make their own investments. In what? In what? They're not investing in themselves. I mean, they have to take that money, and then they have to...
How about in portfolios of junk bonds that they try to pass off to others and make basically speculative things? How about when I don't know, Goldman Sachs makes a bubble in bread or metals, just basically completely wrecks the bread market for a while, so that they try to kind of corner the market. What is that? Why should they be allowed to do that? I don't know. Well, the Glass-Steagall presumably was supposed to prevent that. You have all these insurance companies that later asked the government and the taxpayers to bail them out. Remember AIG? Remember all the tax insurers? Isn't that like the last resort? Who's underwriting these policies? Well, if it's just a speculative thing and you're going to get bailed out by the government because you're too big to fail, then maybe the problem is the too big to fail part. Maybe the banks should be a little more decentralized. Maybe the cities should open their own banks like Oakland just did. And like Nebraska, the state has been doing for a while for their own people instead of Wall Street opening up all the banks and the Federal Reserve System running everything. Hey, what if the telecommunication companies stopped consolidating so much into too big to fail telcos and they stopped having a cartel where they don't compete? They don't compete in the same city. And this is legal somehow. What if they could stop suing the cities for competing with them. Because cities have broadband internet, which is faster some of the time. Like New York City here can actually make faster internet, and they do in some of the Wi-Fi hotspots. Used to be telephone kiosks. They're building NYC internet. But a lot of these cities are actually being sued in state court by corporations. It's kind of like large corporations, which are themselves a government, enabled construct, are suing cities, which are a democratic government organization, in state courts, which you basically have government stuff suing government stuff to prevent competition. So, no, Ben, I don't think they always invest in the public interest all the time.
To use it to invest in something else. Places like Apple. Some that fail and some that succeed.
Places like Apple, great. Well, Apple has billions of dollars in cash that it doesn't know what to do with. It doesn't need the investment because it has cash. It has cash. It can fund itself. If it wanted to fix all the bugs in Mac OS and all the stuff that is constantly being broken in the next release, it could just throw $2 billion at it and do it. Okay? So they don't need the investment. Apple's a bad example. And by the way, Apple doesn't pay the taxes for the U.S. taxpayers. As far as I know, I could be wrong about Apple. I don't want to slander them. I could be wrong about it. But a lot of these corporations pay effectively zero to the American into the American quality standard of life. They provide a lot of products, but they don't pay in taxes. So the consumers win, but as far as getting to work, you're on your own. They don't help you with that.
This idea that banks are somehow evils is just not the case unless...
Yeah, Cenk said they're not evil. It's just the incentive structure.
You're talking about them working in Congress. Here you and I agree. Working in congruity with a Congress, with a legislature that is attempting to give them kickbacks. Both you and I agree on this. So, and finally, as far as the idea that...
That's great. I love that these guys highlight the agreement.
Republicans pass tax cuts because they're beholden to their donors. Okay, and Democrats pass tax increases because the unions give them hundreds of millions of dollars every year. And I don't see Democrats complain about this.
Boom! That's a great point. If someone took this point and they put, a little cigar over here, maybe like a Sherlock Holmes pipe, and then like a double-sided hat, I'd love it. This is a nice score, Ben Shapiro. I hope you're watching this part of my expert commentary on your performance. I think we're about to cut the capitalism commercial.
You got me there. The unions give money to the Democrats. Am I
angry about that? I mean, does it upset you as much as, bankers giving money to Republicans?
No. The corporations give way more than the unions.
It depends which corporation.
I don't know. Let's fact check this. Do corporations give more money to the unions? How would we figure this out? So, corporations, lobbyists. How much was spent on lobbying in 2017? And then you have a breakdown. Hey kids, this is how you Google. Lobbying spending database. Look at that. Open Secrets is I didn't prepare this, by the way. OpenSecrets.org is actually collects a bunch of data. And you can see what the total spending is. So let's see. Pharmaceuticals, health products. There's a lot of lobbying there. Gee, I wonder if you do Medicare Part D, who wrote that legislation? Was it the lawmakers or was it the actual pharma company executives, for example, that wrote Medicare Part D to benefit themselves to some extent, because they wrote it? I mean, whatever, that happens, Corporations are not evil or anything, but they have their incentives. Oh, look, for example, look at some of the criticisms of Medicare Part D. By the design of the program, the federal government is not permitted to negotiate the prices of drugs with the drug companies as federal agents do in other programs. See that thing with the collective bargaining? The thing that makes single payer costs less because they can collectively bargain the price? So it was built in that they couldn't do that anymore. And so the Department of Veterans Affairs, the VA, which is allowed to negotiate drug prices, has been estimated to pay between 40% and 58% less than, on average, than Medicare Part D. Okay, so, the drug companies made a little a benefit for themselves. Hey, what happened to the people that actually wrote this deal? Well, let's see. Former Congressman Billy Tauzin, Republican. What did he do? He steered the House through the bill, then retired soon after and took a $2 million a year job as, oh, look at this, president of Pharmaceutical Research Manufacturers of America, Pharma, the main industry lobbying group. So the actual guy that steered it through the House, who was a lawmaker, then became the actual main president of the lobbying group. Okay, then Medicare boss Thomas Scully, who threatened to fire Medicare chief actuary Richard Foster, so he was the chief actuary, if he reported how much the bill would actually cost, was negotiating for a new job as a pharmaceutical lobbyist as the bill was working through Congress. Oh, and by the way, a total of 14 congressional aides quit their job to work for the drug and medical lobbies immediately after the bill's passage. So you could say that possibly this was the industry themselves writing the bills and then through a revolving door hiring the people. But hey, that happens, right? What about Wall Street with the revolving door? Matt Taibbi has a nice piece in the Rolling Stone from several years ago. Why isn't Wall Street in jail? You can go read that. No one went to jail for this kind of stuff. And again, there was no criminal wrongdoing that was found enough to put anybody away. But also, there was a huge revolving door. Anyway, let's look at this. Who's doing the lobbying? Is Cenk right? Pharmaceuticals, health products, insurance, electric utilities, electronics, manufacturing equipment. Now Google's increasing their lobbying. Hey, what is this? How much money is this total? What does this mean? Okay. All the years. So are we really saying that in the years 1998 to 2017, you had literally $3.5 billion that was spent by lobbying? All right, let me find unions here. Oop, I found them. Okay, business associations. Maybe that means unions. Let's see. Business associations. Unions. Nope. Lobbying. Total lobbying by business associations. Okay. Who are those? U.S. Chamber of Commerce, Business Roundtable, National Federation of Independent Business, employee-owned. So, yeah, this looks close to lobbying. Okay, so I would say Cenk probably right because here we have 3.5 billion and 2.5 billion and 2.2 billion, and then we have 2 billion. There's still a lot, but then you have oil and gas, manufacturing, and so forth. And basically, I think if you add up all of these things, it's far going to exceed this category, plus possibly some subcategory of this, and etc. Okay, I give this one to Cenk.
Yeah, that's okay. True. Look it up. You can Google it. It's really easy.
Just did it. Thanks.
So, do I object to taking out union money from politics? Hell no, I don't object. Take it all out. Take the union money out. Take the corporate money out. Take all the big money out.
Libertarians should love you. I hope Ben Shapiro loves you.
Supposed to represent us and not the donors, no matter who the donors are. So
remember, this is the guy who wants to get money out of politics. Wolfpack. Of course he's going to say this. I think this is a win for Cenk.
In terms of the question that you asked, Glass-Steagall, well, aren't they investing in things? No. I have a literal answer for you. Oftentimes what they do is financial derivatives. In fact, that's the majority of what they do. And financial derivatives is simply gambling. That's what crashed the 2008 economy. And
yeah, he's going to get a lot of cheers for that.
What is so damaging about the removal of Glass-Steagall is now they could do their financial derivative gambling with depositor money. Boy, isn't that nice. They take your money and they gamble with it. And if they lose, well, that's a sad day for you. But if they win, they keep the profits. You know what that is? That's privatizing the gains and socializing the losses.
I think he makes a really good point here. Let's gauge the audience reaction.
So it's not that the banks are evil. Of course they're not evil. It's just that they're driven to make more money. Of course, that is the whole point of maximizing profit. So if we say, hey, banks, you're allowed to go and buy politicians, although the Supreme Court would say, no, they're just talking to them. They just gave them billions of dollars. They're just having a conversation, right? Just because they gave them billions.
He's in his element here. This is like he's been spearheading the wolf pack for what, like 2 years now?
Dollars is they don't. Do they want something in return? Of course, they want something in return, and that's our money. So what they got, what they got was.
This is Cenk's way of talking, by the way. Honestly, I like his way of talking. It's slower. It's he asks these rhetorical questions. I don't know. He kind of makes it simple, and he simplifies it, and he says it, and he's stopped insulting the audience. So I'm starting to swing over to Cenk here.
Laws passed by politicians to remove Glass-Steagall, and yes, Clinton and Gingrich, yes, both parties are guilty on that. But
Thank you. I think that's very important to get the partisanship out of the issues.
Now the Democrats want to put it back and the Republicans don't. And they took our depositor money and they gambled with it. And if you thought if you gambled, you get to keep all the profits, and if you lost, it didn't affect you at all, you would probably gamble a lot of money too. And you would take a lot of risk until you crash the economy, and that's exactly what happened.
So
Ben, let me just add one piece to this question. You'll respond to it too. You've talked a lot
Oh, don't ruin it. He was just about to agree with him, I think.
about the corruption in politics, and a core part of the Trump campaign was railing against the establishment, which he thought was corrupted, and a lot of the big donors were initially against him. So which way is the Republican Party going to go on this? Is it
Can you guys agree on this? I wonder, because Ben is kind of against Trump, right? But he's against Trump for other reasons. And he's also a bit of an establishment guy in that he is a typical conservative, right? Someone that Steve Bannon and others would call a cuck. So I wonder, on the other hand, and he used to write for Breitbart, but then he kind of left. So I wonder, on the other hand, though, right? He did talk about a lot of the establishment waste. So the question is he or is he not? I'm going to stop moving the mouse in this outline.
Trumpism and the grassroots movement, or the establishment?
Well, I mean, when it comes to money in politics, I think that breakdown doesn't really hold. I mean, the fact is that President Trump, during the campaign, talked routinely about how he engaged in putting money into politics. So, I mean, this is a game that a lot of people are playing. It's kind of a weird question. But as far as the idea that all money should be out of politics, here's the problem. Okay, TYT, we both have corporations, and we expound upon politics every single day. And we motivate thousands of people, right, every day, on both sides of the aisle.
Boom. This is what it's all about. Ladies and gentlemen and babies.
That is effectively an in-kind contribution. Now, you campaigned with Bernie Sanders. Did you do it because you expected? That's fine. Did you
Zinger, I like that.
Did you do that because you supported Bernie Sanders, or did you do that because you expected some gimme for TYT in return? I assume you did it because you supported Bernie Sanders, right?
Yes.
So, okay. So, the point that I am making is to attribute to everyone else bad intent when it comes to political spending in politics, but to yourself, it's totally fine. And when it comes to other media entities that give in-kind contributions on a regular basis through their coverage.
That is a well-deserved cheer. And Ben is like, hold on. I'm about to drive this home. But he already got the cheer. So he's not going for the cheer. He wants to drive home a point. Props, Ben.
This is when the New York Times, which is biased to the left, spends an inordinate amount of time and money reporting on Mitt Romney's idiotic stories about how he was in high school and cutting a gay kid's hair in 1932. If you're saying to me that that is less impactful on the political sphere than a corporation, which is a group giving money to a political candidate for purposes of supporting that candidate, I fail to see how you can say for yourself that you are innocent in this, but everyone else is guilty. I don't believe that. Either everyone's guilty or everybody is innocent, or...
That's a fair point. And hey, Cenk, you've spent 2 years building Wolfpack. I'm sure you have an answer to this distinction, right? Clarify it for us, man.
Or if you can find the actual cases of guilt where there's a quid pro quo, then we agree. That's prosecutable, right?
Yes.
So, other point. When you talked about...
By the way, Ben does this a lot, and I like this. This I like about Ben a lot. He says, look, if there's an actual problem, point out the specific problem, and we'll both go after this. And we agree. But don't just say there's a general thing, right? I like this approach because, again, it focuses on specific problems, specific scenarios, and facts. I just hope he has the same approach to, let's say, global warming, or greenhouse gases, or science, or economics, or healthcare, or anything where he's not an expert, right? It would be nice for him to test his theories, which are kind of general, that say, oh, government is always worse than the market, and capitalism is always better than everything at creating stuff. Well, what about, Linux, Safari, WebKit, Wikipedia, everything open source that you use basically today? What about science? What about all this stuff? Is that all capitalism? Anyway, I'm just saying, on some level, people are ideological. When they're not, when he wants to talk about specific facts, then he's good. And when Cenk wants to talk about specifics and facts back up what he's saying, then he's good. So props to Ben on this topic. Cenk, respond.
About the 2008 economy, you talked about Glass-Steagall and how this led to the crash. The real reason that the crash happened had far less to do with Glass-Steagall. I opposed the bailouts, by the way. It had far less to do with Glass-Steagall than it had to do with the fact that the federal government was actively promulgating the notion that corporations should give subprime mortgages to people who are not qualified as people who could take out loans.
Fair point.
This meant...
But, by the way, still, speaking about specifics, get into specifics, Ben. What do you mean by promulgating? Do you mean they were forcing banks to lend to someone who couldn't pay the money back? Was there a single instance of a bank forced to give a ninja, no asset, no income? What is it? Ninja, no income, no job, no asset loan? I mean, maybe, and then you'd have a point, and you'd have a case. I'm using Ben's terminology, and then we go after that. But show me one example where they were forced. What do you mean by promulgating?
That, as you say, corporations are not inherently conservative. They're not inherently free market. They're inherently...
See how, by the way, people cheer for like vague statements, right? But if you have to clarify them, they become less sexy, less pithy, and less of a nice sound bite. So if you have to get bogged into details, people like me will be actually interested because you get to the bottom of what you're talking about. But it's kind of surface in a lot of these debates.
Profit-driven. So if they felt that they could give a bunch of subprime mortgages and this would inflate the real estate prices, and if things went wrong, they just foreclose on the nearest house, and the market just keeps going up and up and up, and they can just, as you say, turn these into derivatives and sell them on the open market by pretending that these are all good loans because they have government backing, then of course you're going to get an inflated, overheated real estate market. But the question there is not the workings of the free market. It's the combination that you like in a mixed economy that I hate. Okay, I hate mixed economies in the sense that I don't...
Okay, interesting. Hold up. So he was getting into specifics of how things work, and that's great. And we could talk about this is what he actually thinks in his mind, and this is what he believes, and we can evaluate it. And now he's opening up and saying something new. He hates mixed economies. So is he really an anarcho-capitalist, like libertarian? Is he a guy that wants to get rid of all the government and just have a non-mixed economy where it's just the free market? I mean, the courts, the roads, whatever, you can privatize it all, right? Of course, there's a little problem. If I have a lot of money, I can go into your neighborhood and buy up the courts, and then the courts will vote my way because profit is the only thing that matters, right? And then the private courts will all be bought up, and I'll steal your money, and then I'll just rent the courts to the next guy, and I'll make a profit. I mean, I can get a paramilitary, a gang. I can get marauders and just steal everything by force because I have a bigger army. I mean, it could happen. Maybe there is something that will arise that will stabilize everything. But until then, we're kind of stuck with the Hobbesian idea of the Leviathan that keeps everyone else in awe. So you don't have the reprisals that you have between, let's say, the rival families like Romeo and Juliet with the Capulets and the Montagues. Anyway, whatever. Are you really an anarcho-capitalist? You really don't want a mixed economy between a public sector and a private sector? Let's see.
I don't believe that capitalism and socialism should be mixed, that corporatism is the solution. Okay, what you're talking about is...
In his mind, he's so ideological. And I would love to see, the concrete facts, like he was just talking about with the subprime mortgages, underlying what he's talking about. Like science is not just philosophy, right? You test your theories. And if your theories don't match the facts, you discard the theory or you amend it to something that matches the facts. So these are not just words. Okay, so you don't want a mixed economy because you don't want to mix capitalism and socialism. Well, the public market is people collectively owning large corporations. So who really owns them? It's the shareholders. Isn't that kind of like the biggest socialism project in one sense? Socialist project in collective ownership of the means of production? Or how about the army? You really don't support socialism, right? So you don't want a top-down huge organization with 800 bases around the world that spends more than the other, 19 countries combined, the next 19 countries. Yeah, you don't want that, right?
Corporatism. You're talking about Glass-Steagall, which freed, they're getting rid of Glass-Steagall. It freed the corporations to invest in a free market manner, but also they gave a bailout to all of these corporations by essentially incentivizing them to give a bunch of bad loans, knowing that if things went bad, then all the losses.
So he's talking about the specifics again. But what was that whole crap about not mixing socialism and capitalism? That whole high-level hand-waving that has absolutely no details behind it. I'd like to hear more about that thing.
Would be socialized. The problem there is not the free market. The problem there is a government that is acting as a backstop for bad decisions in the free market by profit-driven corporations.
Anyway, everybody loves this because everyone's driven, who's cheering. A lot of them are driven by the ideology, and you speak to the ideological, the slogans, right? It's like communism when you have the slogans like, I don't know, the proletariat shall rise, or take from each according to his ability, and to each according to his need. So here he says, the government is like the backstop for everything, lender of last resort, and that's really bad. Look, I can understand if he says it creates a moral hazard for the banks, etc., right? But you can see how like a lot of this is driven by ideology, and as long as you say the right words in identity politics, and like you speak the right words. Sometimes it's even dog whistle politics, where you say things that kind of mean the right thing to the in crowd. Yeah, that's really toxic, because ideology is not what's going to win, to help people, ultimately. It's practical testing in the laboratory of democracy, and testing what works better than other things. Actual testing. Sometimes the free market works better. Sometimes single-payer systems outperform the free market in certain things, and that's okay. And by the way, ideologies are really dangerous when they're mixed with power, okay? If you look at a country, whether it's communism, whether it's Nazism, whether it's Islamism, you have a state, let's say Islamism, you have a state where the government completely wants to Islamicize the society, right? But what about the other religions? What about religious freedom, right? But the ideology is, look, if everyone's going to be a Muslim, it's going to be better for the society. If communism is spread to everybody, right? Even if a few people have to die, and a few is like maybe a lot of people, or lose their rights, or live without freedom, well, it's worth it because in the end our ideology is so good. That's the danger. So I'm not really that big of a fan of people thinking ideologically to the exclusion of everything else. And I think what Ben sort of interjected here betrays his ideological basis for a lot of what he says. Look, it's fine to have principles. It's fine to have ideology, but you have to keep testing it against the facts. And if it doesn't work, you have to keep refining it. So that's just a caution. But you're definitely going to get a lot of fans if you don't refine it, because it's the popular thing to just keep saying, the same things. I'm sure if you were a communist in the beginning of the 20th century, and you won, and you are on the winning side, then saying the right things gets you ahead in the party.
Okay. All right, I love that. There was a lot to respond to there, so let me try to take it one at a time. So first off, I love the idea that the government made the banks do the subprime mortgages, and golly gee, the government twisted the banks' arm, and they made billions upon billions of dollars. Oh man, don't make me make another billion. Don't make me make another billion.
I don't know why, that just sounds so kinky.
No, they did those. If they thought they were going to lose money off of it, they would have a fiduciary responsibility not to do it.
I agree.
Okay, it was. They were not forced to make billions of dollars. They were not forced.
So he basically agreed. Look, logically, he agrees that they didn't. That if they were going to lose money, they'd have a fiduciary duty not to do it. And he presumably thinks that they didn't violate the fiduciary duty. So he thinks that they basically did it because they were going to make money. So he kind of concedes the point to Cenk. Or maybe he thinks that they broke fiduciary duty I doubt it, but it could happen.
Forced to then have us bail them out.
Right.
They did all of that because there's legalized bribery in America.
Right, because the
Okay.
government was giving them money. Correct.
So now let me address that.
Wait, let me unpack this. So what's Ben's point? So the government gave money to the banks to do things that they would have done anyway if Glass-Steagall was repealed. Well, I don't know. I guess if the banks were able to make all this money, they would have done it anyway, as long as they could. If they realize it's a good strategy. Someone's got to do it, and you got to hate the game, not the player.
Say, well, what's the difference between your speech and their speech? Mine is actually speech, and theirs is money. So there's a giant difference.
But you spend money on your speech.
First off,
Okay, so good. So Cenk goes back to the roots. He's actually answering the question of, and again, props to Cenk for answering the questions. This is what he does without fail. He's answering every single question. I give him props for being intellectually honest and like taking the questions as they come, not dodging them, and literally answering every one. It would be nice if he didn't berate the audience that time, but I think we're way past that.
so they say, no, Supreme Court says, no, money is speech now. No, money is property. It's not speech. And so if money was speech, well, then if you go to a hooker and you say, oh, no, officer, I was just talking to her. Okay, money is not speech. So, for example, to give you a sense of it, to compare me saying I like Bernie Sanders and you saying whoever you like.
I guess the hooker thing could have, I wonder if he could have picked a better example. Didn't go so well with the audience, but it's kind of mildly amusing.
Is the equivalent of this is obviously nonsensical. I believe it's obvious. So in a recent five-year period,
I like the mannerism, body language of honesty over here. The thing he just did, where it's like, I believe it's honest.
I believe it's obvious. So in a recent five-year period, the top 200 corporate givers, they both in donations and in lobbying spent $5.8 billion. Okay? So that is not the same thing as me saying, hey, I like what Bernie's saying about college and Medicare. And when they did, why do you think they did? It was not because, hey, they genuinely like Bernie or Trump or Hillary. Because in return for that $5.8 billion, they got $4.4 trillion in government subsidies.
Okay, I'm not going to Google that. But let's just go 50-50 on maybe he looks kind of confident about it. Let's do this. What is this again?
And when they did, why do you think they did? It
Why?
was not because, hey, they genuinely like Bernie or Trump or Hillary. Because in return for that $5.8 billion, they got $4.4 trillion.
All right, here's what we're going to do. Oh, man, Google. I wonder what improves the world. Could it be technology? Okay. So he kind of, okay, here we go. 4.3 trillion. This is obviously the Daily Wire. This is Ben Shapiro on Cenk. I'm just going to do this because this is Sunlight Foundation, who I have no idea, but I'm just curious. Between 2007 and 2012, they spent a combined $5.8 billion on federal lobbying, and a year-long analysis by Sunlight Foundation suggests, however, that what they gave pales compared to what those corporations got, $4.4 trillion. So this is where he got it from, Sunlight Foundation, and the year-long analysis by Sunlight Foundation. So I could go into this, but I'll leave that to you. Exercise for the reader.
$1 billion in government subsidies. So, which leads...
By the way, isn't it awesome we're living in the 21st century that we could look this up? I mean, try going to the library and look at microfiche and film of the 40s, I'm giving away my age, but I used to actually go to the library when I was going to junior high school, okay? Today is so much more advanced. You could be on a phone. You could be on a cell phone in the middle of the desert and look this up. That's pretty amazing. And you guys are arguing about what government's going to do. Let's put this in perspective. Automation is good. Yeah, it's going to take away people's jobs. But if we solve that by giving people free money and, Medicare-for-All, whatever, and safety nets, then people are free to live. And we get better and better technology. Look at what technology has done. Here's YouTube. There's Facebook. Here's the World Wide Web. There's Wikipedia. And I could look all this up. How old is this? This is 20 years old. I have running water in my house. I have an air conditioner. I have stuff that kings didn't have in the 19th century. So I would say, yeah, I think we can afford to make sure everyone gets a checkup and a dental appointment once in a while. So I think we're not going to bankrupt the country with this because other countries have it. And the same goes for food and everything else. So just want to say to you guys, thanks for being here, in the 21st century. Or maybe later you're looking at this archive footage. But anyway, thank you for being here because you see, along with me, how much technology has improved the world. If you really want to improve the world, as I started saying in the beginning, do it with technology. Build something. Create something. Organize something. And don't wait for politicians because your vote matters. But honestly, what matters more is what you do in your local community and what you build and how you raise your children and how you can spend time with your family. That's my personal view.
Which leads to, I actually think, the biggest point here, the difference between big government and small government. So a lot of times conservatives say, oh, you guys like big government. That's not true. So let me explain. If I asked you, hey, you got a plumbing job, what would you like, big pipes or small pipes? I don't know. What's the job we have? It depends. It's the same thing with the government.
I like this analogy. Let's see where he's going with it.
Okay, what size government would you like? I don't know. What's the job we have? So to say big government or small government doesn't make any sense. So
let's hear from our
Mom,
sponsors.
what are we doing here? Your father's laundering money for a Mexican drug cartel.
I don't want to have this feeling. You'd be better off dead.
This is just another betrayal, isn't it?
Look around. This place is death.
Yeah, I think these ads are very well targeted. Okay, Cenk, no, you're more interesting than this ad. Go ahead.
Government or small government doesn't make any sense.
I wish I could do like a remix. Big government, small government, big government. Okay.
So, for example, do I want a big government that invades Iraq? Hell no, I don't. No way. And
Cheer,
Ben,
cheer, cheer.
you were vociferously for the Iraq War, so in that sense, you loved the big government. Couldn't get enough of it.
Cheer, cheer, cheer.
And
Ben Shapiro should address that whole thing with the military-industrial complex and the 800 bases and the military budget that is bigger than the next 19 countries combined, and the Pentagon not being able to account for trillions of dollars. Yeah, that would be nice if he addressed why he supports that inefficiency.
I could go on and on and on. Republicans say, no, we don't like big government, but we'd like to be inside your uterus.
Oh, he's going to go there. Into the uterus. Hookers. I'm just talking to her.
So just admit it.
Wait a second. Wow, he's got a big, big cheer for this.
It's no problem. Just say it. Say I love big government. It's okay. So you're talking about when you like when you're rich and you want tax cuts. Oh no, I don't want big government. I want small government. But when it's convenient for you and you like oil subsidies and you like wars and you like to meddle in people's private lives, then you love big government.
Oh, there's a lot of libertarians in the audience. I can hear it.
Okay, so I need to respond to some of that.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so first of all, I'd like to point
Ben, by the way, I think he gets adrenaline at this point.
out that Cenk's big government, small government dichotomy was proposed by you, not by me. I talk about the proper scope of the government's involvement in particular areas the same way that you do, and we may disagree on all of that.
I like that. Again, thank you for being at least moderate and pointing out your agreement.
Point is that overall, if you're talking about the level of government spending, it needs to go down, and you believe that it really needs to go up. Okay, so it's disingenuous.
It depends.
It's
not on war, does it?
No, but overall...
Not on the war.
No, this is disingenuous. He doesn't think it has to go up in everything. Does he think we need to have more oil subsidies or coal mines? No, I don't think he does.
Drugs, not on so many of those wasteful programs. It depends, but let me...
Overall, you want the federal budget increased. Overall, I would like...
I'll let you finish. Yeah, it's kind of tough. I mean, he needs to, say, look, that's a straw man. No, I don't. And he did. And then he's like, all right, I'll let you finish. I think that's a classy thing that he did.
The federal budget decreased. To pretend that this is not true is to lie. Okay, and when you suggest that...
What? Did he just accuse him of lying even though he, that he just said that he's a straw man, whatever. Go take a drink, Cenk.
There is no difference between,
Gangster.
We just have different visions of what the government should cover. These things cost different things.
No, you're straw manning him because in your mind, he wants to increase government. Yeah, many progressives actually do. But in many ways, they want less government. So in a way, you think he's a giant socialist, and many progressives think that Republicans are giant racists, which are just straw men.
Okay, the war in Iraq was very expensive. You know what's more expensive? Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. All of these are vastly more expensive than the war in Iraq
We paid
and
into it.
Afghanistan.
Yeah, but guess what? Those are mandatory expenses. The actual military budget is the largest discretionary expense. So we have to pay the mandatory expenses. The government has to pay that, and then they have the discretionary. And they use their discretion to take about half of the tax money from our paycheck for that.
Now, as far as this, again, going back to this idea that, again, I don't like this big government
To be fair, I meant half of the discretionary paycheck.
dichotomy any more than you do, in the sense that you say, well, it's big government.
To be clear, I meant half of the discretionary taxes from the paycheck. All right, I'm done.
Government for the government to get inside people's wounds. And I say that it is the government's job to preserve life, liberty, and property, and one of those things is life.
Okay, he gets on the side of pro-life, and I could totally understand him, and he can totally own it here. I am just, so Cenk is going to say big government gets in your womb, and Ben's going to say, well, you're preserving life. I think on that, there's not going to be a resolution, so I hope they move to another topic.
To protect you from someone else taking it. Okay? To protect you from someone else taking it. Now, when it comes to the idea that all money in politics is bad, again, I ask you.
By the way, I'm glad that they want to protect you from someone taking your life. But if it's just a disease taking your life, well, you're on your own if you don't have the money. Right? Right?
Final question, final point on, we're going through 10 points at a time here, but final point here. When you say money in politics is bad, again, I ask you, Buddy Roemer gave you $4 million to start TYT. What did he expect in return?
He expected that you would make money from sponsors, and these sponsors sell products to regular people. So regular people have to have disposable income to spend on those products. Wouldn't it be nice if they had disposable income? Yeah, that's called the middle class. Yeah, okay.
Should he not have given you money? Was the money not speech? It was just money, after all. It's just like a hooker, I assume. So are you the prostitute? How did this work?
Oh, zinger. I don't even know if that makes logical sense, but whoa. Yeah, he played that hooker thing. Awesome. He's all up in his uterus right now. I just had to say that. Look at Cenk writing stuff down.
When you take money from Al Jazeera, does that make you a hooker for the Qataris? How does that work?
Ooh, he got one in there. What's up with that?
It was an awesome conflation. Okay, we were talking about money in politics and how money is not speech when you give it as a campaign donation, and you turn it around to a business investment. In a business...
I have to say, yeah, he conflated it pretty well. And I'm glad that Cenk is actually calling him out on it. Oh, you know what? This is becoming a prize fight. Okay, so Cenk says, you're up in our uterus, you're big government. Ben comes back with, no, we're protecting the life of the fetus. All right, awesome. Then Ben goes and says, you know that hooker thing you were talking about? Money is not speech? Well, your investor, the one that paid you for your business, right? He wanted to see money. Oh, yeah, I just explained. The money comes from sponsors. The sponsors sell products. But no, he wants Cenk to get Bernie because Bernie will get, apparently, this guy some special favors. Okay, so this guy, I guess, is not like a banker or a big corporation because Bernie is like the worst guy to give them favors. So I don't know who this guy is that paid for Cenk's show, but I have a feeling that the sponsors that sold stuff had a lot to do with it.
This investment, it has nothing to do with speech. Money is money. They gave us an investment, so because they believed in our business. That has nothing to do with politics.
That's great. And you think the government is in the business of regulating business. So if the government is in the business of regulating business, what would be the problem with the government telling Buddy Roemer he is not allowed to invest in your business?
No, those are two different...
Okay. Well, this no sounded a little defensive, but I know what he means. He's going to make the distinction. He's going to try to make the distinction, hopefully not fail.
Issues, no problem. No, it's one thing is to say, let's set reasonable limitations on what can happen around elections, which is, again, what most developed Western countries do. So, and they have different versions of that rule.
Again, good point. Look at other countries.
Ads you can run, you can't run ads within a certain period of time. You have public financing versus private financing. Those are rules around an election. That is a completely different issue than the government saying randomly you can and can't invest in businesses. Why? So you're conflating those two issues that have nothing to do with one another.
Why?
I think he landed the plane pretty well.
So let's just
what does why mean?
Because
you believe in education, so why don't you believe in healthcare?
Because it's a free country, and I get to spend my money wherever I damn well please.
So as we're coming.
All right. Look at him nodding. Yeah, I think Ben got the zinger off again. Yeah, Ben.
To the close here. We're going to do one more.
I got to ask him. All
right, very quick.
So you damn well please. Okay, so when...
he's going to unpack it. He's going to unpack the zinger. What? Are you actually going to talk about substance? No.
The Koch brothers or Bloomberg or Soros puts in hundreds of millions of...
I like that he said Soros because he's on the other side, right? He wants to make this a nonpartisan issue.
...dollars into elections... You think, well, I just do them because they're good guys, and they damn well please buying all those politicians. Or you think, no, the politicians would never be affected by hundreds of millions of dollars in legalized bribes.
I mean, he's passionate about this. He started the wolf pack, so let's, go for this.
Okay.
And you can't just spend your money anywhere you want. Of course there are rules. You can't bribe people.
Right.
There's many things you can't do with your money. And one of those should be bribing politicians, but we made it legal.
Cenk.
So I'm curious what your opinion on that is. Do you think that they're just golly shucks? They just mean well?
Cenk, you're a lawyer, so you know that bribery requires two parties to the bribe.
He's a lawyer.
If I give money...
Wait, and he's a lawyer.
...to a politician, there...
Are we saying there's two lawyers here? Who's this guy?
...must be something in return. If there is no quid pro quo, there is no bribery.
You think there's nothing in return?
Well,
you think the politicians don't do those favors?
I think very often there is something in return. But I want you to point me to the things that are in return, not just say that all spending on politics ought to be forbidden except for the...
That I like. Again, specifics. Show us specifics, like Medicare Part D, possibly.
Young Turks.
No, that is of course not what we say. If you want to get money out of politics and then you said the Young Turks cannot donate money to politicians, I'd say, of course, that's the whole point of getting money out of politics.
Wait, so
so this idea that
Come on.
It's so disingenuous. Even if you're...
Oh, what is going on with Ben? He's like, come on. He's a little nervous here. I haven't seen him like this.
You're a Republican, and you're a conservative. You think there isn't crony capitalism? You think that $4.4 trillion that went in subsidies isn't because they got campaign donations? You know it's because they got campaign donations.
Cenk, okay, final question.
This is going to be the last word on
Final
this.
thing here on this, okay? Final question on this. So, Young Turks...
So he's going to get the final answer. Is that your final answer, Cenk? Well, if it's your final question, Ben.
...is super successful. You have 80 million uniques. It's wonderful. Do you think Bernie Sanders would care more if you gave him $10,000 or if you dedicated your entire network to kissing his ass for an election cycle?
All right.
I'm not going to even.
So, two things about this. First of all, I think you and I will...
All right, I am. No, I'm not.
Agree. I think you and I will agree...
Oh, you will agree. I love this part. I love where they agree.
That what we did in praising some of Bernie's programs, a lot of Bernie's programs, but not all. For example, I disagreed with him on guns, and I thought Hillary's education program was slightly better than Bernie's. And
for the record, just to disclose my views, I kind of agree with Bernie on guns. I think he's one of the most pro-gun people in the Democratic Party, which means he understands the pulse of the rest of America that owns guns. And people, outside the cities. Now, I'm in the city. Honestly, myself, I don't appreciate guns. I would like to be able to run away from my assailants, if there are a lot of them, rather than be gunned down by a ranged weapon. Having said that, I respect the fact that the rest of America owns guns and it's in the Constitution, and little old ladies can defend themselves against the large guy in their house. So, me personally, I'm maybe for guns in people's houses to defend themselves. There's also statistics that show that those guns are dangerous for if you have little kids and so forth. But, I'm for smart guns that can only be activated by you, and they're in your house. Anyway, that's me, my politics. But I actually think Bernie Sanders is like the man of the people. Like, he's not necessarily left or right in this. And I like that. So I disagree with Cenk about the gun thing. I think there's too much that Democrats do to feed the fear-mongering if they're going to take our guns. Like, that's not going to happen. But there's so many people, talking about gun violence. And I don't want to that's a whole other thing. But I disagree with Bernie on education. I don't think college should be free for everybody. That's too expensive. I think MOOCs, massive online courses, should be free and subsidized by the government so that we can learn how to it could be a knowledge economy, and we could all be smarter and more educated.
And by the way, I agree with Republicans on the Export-Import Bank. So it's not blind allegiance. That is not what we do, not remotely, okay? Second of all, I think you'll agree with me that the mainstream media...
And by the way, it's true. That's not why they support Bernie Sanders. It's not because Bernie Sanders is going to give them an environment where they make more money. They really believe in this stuff. They have an ideology, and they have an ideology. And that's why they have radio shows, and that's why they have sponsors, and that's why they have investors, and that's why people listen to them, and that's why Politicon is so popular. And who am I?
Kissing Hillary Clinton's ass for 2 straight years was a much bigger problem.
Would you outline?
I think they're agreeing here. And who am I? I'm Greg Magershack.
Distinction that you're asking for, the distinction that you're asking for, and now I've answered, I think, 4 times is, one is speech, and by the way, protected, you said life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. I think we all agree to that. I got a big applause line. I also agree. And in our Constitution, the First Amendment is right to speech and freedom of the press. So that is that rubric. Money is not in the First Amendment. There is no right to spend money on politicians. Money is money, speech is speech.
All right, so let's do rapid fire now as we come to the close here. I think, by the way, there's wide agreement about the corruption in politics, maybe different ways how to deal with it. But
thank you, mister, for recognizing that. And who is this?
This has been a very good conversation. So I'll go first to Ben. As we look at 2020, what will be a winning message and who will be a winning candidate on the Republican side in 2020?
So,
you know what? Maybe those weren't boos. Because right now no one's booing. You can't boo that. It's a question. But it sounds like boos. So I might have been wrong a little bit about the boos level. Or is it bows? Acoustics.
Hi everyone, Michelle Mike here, lead art director for West Elm.
So, I think that the greatest ally that the Republicans have is the incompetence and stupidity of the Democratic Party. The 2016.
All right, well, and he might agree with that because they're not supporting the popular policies that 90% or 70% of people actually polls show want.
In fact, I have a feeling that Cenk actually might agree with me on this. That 2016 election, Donald Trump became president of the United States, right? Hillary Clinton was the worst candidate in the history of mankind.
Well, I wouldn't say he's a little bit facetious here, or maybe he's exaggerating, or maybe he really thinks that. I don't know. But anyway, yeah. Okay, go ahead.
And that had... So...
I can see where he's coming from.
The Republican message I never thought was a particularly losing message. I just think that what we have right now is such a polarized politics that it's going to be very difficult for anybody to pass anything in this climate. I also...
Yes, thank you. And by the way, you guys sometimes help to exacerbate it by not underscoring how much agreement you have usually. But you guys are pretty honest in this debate, and I really enjoyed both of you kind of debating. I'm sorry if I was more critical of Ben, maybe, but I was honestly trying to be fair. And when Cenk said something that's unsupported, I would jump on him as well, I think. I think I'm fair, but I am biased as well.
I think that what we have almost a reactionary feel on both sides. Like, what I like about this debate is that we're actually talking about ideas, which is actually pretty rare in this sphere.
Boom, thank you, because you're both well-meaning people and you're smart, and we need more of that in our politics.
Well, what's become more common is that on the left, there's this retreat to intersectionality as an identity politics. This idea that if we can cobble together a group of people who are feeling victimized by American society, we have black people and we have Hispanic people and we have women and we have gays and lesbians and transgenders, and they all feel really bad about how American politics is going. And if we push that notion, we can create a coalition. There'll be a brand new coalition never before seen in American politics, and that requires a woman to run, or that requires a black woman to run, or that requires a minority to run. If they do that, then what you're going to see from, and I think an equally nasty way, from the right is a response that says, okay.
I think someone's phone just went up.
Okay, well, if you're going to do identity politics, you will see some white identity politics from the right, which I think is really negative.
I think that's a very insightful thing. I mean, clearly, no one on the left is going to deny that they are interested in, the classes of people or groups of people, certain groups, and what's going on, and their disenchantment with American politics. I think this was pretty well described, actually, and the reaction to it from the right as well. Of course, people on the left are going to spin it a different way, and they're going to say, okay, well, white people are just, this is their last hurrah before they stop being the majority, and they just want to get as much power as they can. And, Bill O'Reilly is just afraid that, Leave It to Beaver family is no longer going to be, the mainstay of American political life. But hey, I think that was very well put by Ben, the way he describes it.
I don't want to see either of those things. What I would like to see is the Democrats campaign on the bigger, on the stronger involvement of government in your life and higher taxes program that Cenk wants them to campaign on. The Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren program.
Yes, so you want to talk about the issues, like Bernie says.
And I would like to see the Republicans campaign on my program, a smaller government libertarian program that says the government should get...
Ooh, so you do feel like a libertarian. That explains a lot.
...out of our lives as much as humanly possible.
All right, and for Cenk...
You know what? Fair enough. By the way, libertarians and progressive liberals are both, ready for this? Civil libertarians. Civil liberties. Yeah. Everyone is a liberal. You're a liberal. Conservatives are liberals in the sense that all those liberal policies of desegregation and having everybody, has equal opportunity and all that inequality stuff that used to be with men, women, races, and so forth, everyone's now on the same side. If you talk to a conservative in the 40s and 50s, they would think you're a super raving liberal right now, even though you call yourself a conservative. So on social issues, conservatives are actually quite liberal. What is their last stand is like transgender bathroom rights or whatever, okay? I mean, honestly, libertarians have been there championing people's individual rights since forever. Since the 50s, like anti-sodomy laws, all that stuff, they were there first. So if you're really a libertarian, cool for you. I'm just saying that progressives are also allies of the libertarians on the social front. It's only on economic and fiscal policy that there's sort of this triangle. You've got conservatives, which are fiscally conservative and socially conservative, even though they're actually socially liberal compared to conservatives like 50 years ago. Then you have liberals, which are fiscally liberal and socially liberal. And then you have libertarians, socially liberal and fiscally conservative. So you got this little triangle, and you keep going back and forth in these debates.
For Cenk, what will be a winning message, and who will be a winning candidate for Democrats in 2020?
Yep. So I
wish I could hear what the guy said.
Wouldn't it be weird if this ended up being the stage?
That's what I told you guys backstage. It's a presidential debate.
Okay, so look, Ben.
I'd prefer these guys run for president, honestly, because these guys have thought through so many issues by having to be this pundit or whatever, that as long as these guys, and they seem to be conscientious and fair-minded, you can convince them with pragmatic arguments, which I think is super, super important. A person should have integrity, but they should also be able to be swayed with pragmatic arguments and logic. And I think both of these guys would make great candidates for president if they ran, I'd probably vote for one of these. And Bernie and Ron Paul, I like for their consistency and their concern for the common man, like me.
You said earlier that you didn't set up the big government, small government paradigm, but you just said you want them to run on a small government
yes
platform.
Oh, zinger, but it's like a low-key zinger.
So again, small government doesn't make any sense. So let's break it down. You asked me about particular issues, so I'll give you one. So you were in favor of the Iraq War. That cost us at least $1.5 trillion. Then people turn around and say to Bernie Sanders, well, I mean, college for your kids are middle class. That's unaffordable. That's way too much money. You can't do that. That costs $75 billion a year. First of all, college for your kids, you know what that's called? That's called the American Dream.
Ooh, zinger. Slogan.
And
I like it, though.
And for one Iraq war, for the cost of one Iraq war, we could have gotten 20 years of free college for all those kids and the American dream.
Wow. Okay, maybe college doesn't cost as much as I thought. Okay, let me jump on Cenk a little bit here, okay? College has something called negative elasticity of demand. Not negative necessarily, but what happens is the more money you have available for college, the more the cost of college goes up. So basically, if you have everybody going, the more people go to college, the costs don't go down, they go up. You need to fix the basic unit economics before you make massive investments, right? It's like in my company, I don't just want to attract a lot of customers to my store or a lot of users to my app just to have them leave, right? Or, I first need to make sure the unit economics works, that my customer acquisition cost plus the cost of running the business, right, and serving customers is less than the income that I get. So I first need to get my unit economics right. I need to advertise on Google, whatever, get people coming in. Once it works with 50 people, I can then borrow from a bank or whatever and scale it up to 50,000 people and then scale up from there. But with college, you can't just throw money at the problem. And plus, why go to college? Why go to public school? Why not innovate and why not put money in innovation? Flip the classroom. Have people watch look at the internet. I could go to Coursera right now. I can learn a ton of stuff. Here are some other ones. Udemy, right? I can learn about biology, microbiology, or law, or physics, or whatever. I can go to Treehouse and learn to code, okay? I can go to all these things. And what do I need college for? I need college for testing, certification, socializing, labs, okay? But I don't need a professor giving a lecture to 30 people when they can give a lecture to literally millions of people, right? If someone's good, why waste their voice on only 30 people? Why have an exclusive Ivy League education for just a few people when you can have it for everybody? So yeah, I'm not on board with I think we can save money, but hey, if it's only $75 billion a year, it's still cheaper than a heck of a lot of other things that we spent money on.
So it isn't about big government or small government. It's about what do we do with the money.
Yes, agreed.
That $1.5 trillion could have gone to us, could have gone to the middle class, could have gone to a better economy. Because when you go to college, you come out, you start businesses, you engage in this market, and you make things better, and you employ people. We could have used that for us. Instead, we wasted it in Iraq. And, by the way, I believe, Ben, you want to get tough on Iran, you want to rip up the deal, etc. If you thought the Iraq war was a waste of blood and treasure, wait till you get a load of what happens in Iran. So we're not going to make that mistake again. So what would I run on?
What do you mean we're not going to make that mistake again? We might actually go to war with Iran if certain politicians have their way, or if certain forces go ahead. We might go to war with North Korea. That's 30 million people living there. That's kind of scary. And they have nukes. Yeah, there's a lot of scary things happening, and we're talking about transgender bathrooms. I think we might, again, it's show versus actual issues that matter.
Look, this idea of the identity, that Democrats don't have identity politics, and some of them do.
And by the way, I mean, listen, let people have what they want. Like, I don't care who goes into my bathroom. I'm just saying personally. Again, it's my personal opinion. I've never really paid close attention to, like, the person that walks into my bathroom. Are they really a man? Like, first of all, as a man, I don't mind that much if a woman walked into my bathroom. I'm sure the people that mind are usually, in my opinion, the women would mind that a man walked in. So if it was a transgender man who became a woman, or maybe a cross-dressing man who became look, you go to the bathroom, you do your thing, you come out. Like, what is the? Maybe I'm not understanding it, but I think that compared to, let's say, healthcare for millions of people or the war, like, that is not my thing. Or these pronouns. Really, Ben? Like, you going on stage and saying, oh, well, I don't want to accommodate someone and saying her when I could say his. Would you say that to autistic people, for example? Would you say, oh, look, that guy's autistic. I don't want to, like, accommodate that guy. I want to be able to point out that he's autistic. Like, that just makes you an asshole, in my opinion. But, hey, like, you have other points that are really good. I just think that particular issue is too overstated by you, and you should stop talking about it so much. But you have an audience. You have a show that loves to eat it up. So I'm sure some of them are watching now and are offended because I just offended you guys. I'm sorry. You're not a basket of deplorables. I love you guys.
But
and girls.
Let's not forget that Republicans
and everyone else
do the same and worse. Who was the one who came up with the Southern strategy? That was the Republican Party. And the Southern strategy...
Oh, this should be interesting. I want to find out the truth about the Southern strategy.
Strategy was, let's go get racist white voters in the South. That's a fact.
That's not a fact necessarily. You should know what the right thinks. And I think you didn't research this issue on the right. Go look at Prager University's recent video on this. Prager University, let's see, Southern strategy. Yeah, they made a whole video where the South, they say, just became less racist. And I actually agree. Why would so many people be that racist? The South became less racist and started voting for Republicans. I see that narrative being as true as the other one. Look, there were a lot of Republicans who were actually trying to get the racist vote. Yes. But it was the Democratic Party that had the KKK membership and all that stuff. There were some Republicans that openly said we don't want more people voting because then we don't have the Christian vote, being drowned out. There were actually people that wanted less people voting, and they probably wanted voter suppression laws and stuff like that. So, yeah, there were some people like that. But to say the Southern strategy explains everything, I don't think it's as simple as that. And so he's going to get booed right now. And it's close to the end, so, yeah, he might get booed. Let's see it. He's like, all right, you guys just don't know the truth. Well, tell us the truth, man.
So,
details.
Once again, it's this wonderful capitalist invention called Google. Google it. So, two.
All right, fine. Let's Google it. Southern strategy. Let's see what Wikipedia says. A wonderful non-capitalist invention where people contribute things and editors oversee things and is funded by donations and is self-correcting. Okay, so here we go. Actually, this might be too long for the video. You Google it.
Republican chairmen have said, yes, we did do that strategy, and we apologize. So that's a fact.
Ooh, well, that is probably a fact. I wonder if it's a cherry-picked fact, but it's a fact.
They're the ones who invented identity politics. So when you like identity politics when it serves your interest.
But it's interesting. At least Cenk has this like worldview. I guess he's fact-checked a bunch of this stuff, and so does Ben. And they have their worldviews, and they buttress those views with these facts and these narratives, and then they live in these worlds, and they do battle, and we like to see them do it, don't we?
But all of a sudden when we say, hey...
The question is, do you like me commenting? If yes, leave a comment below. If no, email me.
Can black people have the same rights as white people? Oh, identity politics. Can gay people have the same rights as straight people? Identity politics. It's called equality. Look into it. It's called America. Okay?
All right, well, I think we now know.
U.S.
Yo, by the way, why are people booing this? Is he like being a little bit flippant or like a little bit crazy? Like over here, it says, Cenk loses his mind debating Ben Shapiro on Republican Party. I'm not so sure if he lost his mind during this election, but he's about to chant,
USA! USA! USA!
All right.
Equality for all of us!
Okay.
All right.
yes. Okay, so people followed him. So a lot of people were, I guess, cheering him. And they certainly can't boo the USA. So I think USA, I think he ended on a strong note. And equality of opportunity and equal rights for all, I think that's a good message.
This is a
Ben,
point.
just very quickly, and we'll have to wrap it up.
Very quick, okay?
Very quick.
Okay, I want to respond to a point. This is a point that Cenk made last year in his debate with Dinesh repeatedly for about an hour.
Ooh, look at that. So he has something he wants to go back to, like a callback to another debate. Interesting. Wow, Ben, you really do your homework. All right, I'm interested.
Southern strategy with regard to the Republicans. Okay, I'd like to point out the idea
I remember that debate.
that the entire
He said the party switched in the 70s or so, 80s.
South solidly moved into the Republican category because of the Civil Rights Act is historically false and has been debunked multiple times by people ranging from Sean Trent at Real Clear Politics to professors at the University of Pennsylvania. And there's a bunch of ways to debunk it, including the fact that the Congress did not switch Republican in the South until 1994.
This is also true, and which is why I'm saying there's two sides to this story, and it's interesting to hear these guys duke it out and cherry-pick their facts.
Okay, did it take 30 years for the racists to realize what was going on? 21 senators from the South were Democrats. How many of them became Republicans after the Civil Rights Act? The answer, 1. The other 20 stayed Democrats. In 1952,
look at him. Why is he shaking his head? I mean, that is a fact, but he's shaking his head because he probably thinks, okay, that's not a relevant fact, and I'm about to tell you something. What are you about to tell us, Cenk?
Eisenhower did not win a ton of the South. Eisenhower did win, however, 7 states in the South in 1956 after he sent federal troops down south. The reason that the Republican Party started to win in the South, it began in the 1950s, not after the 1964 Civil Rights Act, and it was largely due to the movement of industry down south. It was new fringe members of the Republican Party, younger members of the Republican Party, who switched over to the Republican Party in the South, not old Democrats, who remained old Democrats and are still old Democrats today.
Ooh, I think, this has a ring of, research to what he said, so I like it.
So I'm going to jump in here.
Okay, I got it. Real quick. You're right.
Very quick.
By the way,
Yeah.
final
This will be
notes
the
are
last
Jimmy
word.
Carter.
Oh,
Jimmy
he's
Carter
right. Okay, he's about to say something relevant and factual, probably. Let's see.
launched his 1980 campaign at the headquarters, that town in Alabama that was the headquarters for the KKK. So to pretend that it was only Republicans playing the bad and evil race strategy is just a lie.
By the way, David Duke couldn't win the Democratic vote. The Grand Wizard of the KKK, he couldn't win the Democratic vote after the 80s. So something must have switched, but I think there's more to this story either way.
All right.
Okay.
Last word.
So that was him responding to his own thing. Okay. So real quick, because you're right, we had a whole almost an hour long debate on the Southern strategy. You guys always cherry pick certain windows of time. In this very narrow window of time, this people change that.
I just went from 1952 to 1994.
Hold on. If you're so right, why did two heads of the RNC come out and say, yes, we did the Southern strategy, and we apologize? Why did Pat Buchanan say to me on MSN?
Okay, so here's the thing. When you cherry pick your facts, right, you still are left with having to answer the other guy's facts. So, good on Cenk, debate strategy to press Ben, answer my facts. Okay, if what you're saying is totally one-sided and true in your favor, how do you answer my facts? Arrow to my face. Boom.
NBC, yes, we did the Southern strategy. Yes, we got whites to vote for us in the South, and we had a good run. Okay, it wasn't me saying it was Republican leaders and Buchanan who did it at the Nixon campaign admitting that that was exactly the strategy.
And there were some members of the Republican Strategy Council who were doing evil things. That doesn't mean all the people who voted for the Republicans were voting for them because of those things. And to impute that motive to tens of millions of people down south is to ignore not only every public opinion poll done, but also to fail to recognize history.
All right, I'm going to cut right in here.
All right, well,
So
that ended about as well as I expected.
first of all, I think we figured out who this crowd wants to run for president in 2020. Ben Shapiro and Cenk Uygur. Second of all, this is exactly the type of debates we need to be having from between the left and the right all across the country.
Yes.
And I want to thank Politicon.
Yes.
I want to thank Politicon because this is exactly what we need in America.
I take it back. This debate was awesome. I got to update my blog.
If we're not listening to each other, then our democracy won't succeed. And that's why I think this has been a very constructive debate. I'm not going to appoint a winner, but the real winner is the audience because I think you've hopefully learned something new.
I like this guy. I want to look up his name from the beginning of that video. And I'm sorry, guy. If you're watching this, I got to learn your name. I like what you have to say.
So please join me in thanking our debater tonight, Ben Shapiro and Cenk Uygur. And give a round of applause to Politicon.
That's the audience, but, you know, the camera, I mean, the light level, the gamma level needs to be adjusted.
Give a round of applause for you. My name's Stephen Alicaro with the Millennial
Thank you. There we go. Stephen Alicaro. I think he meant Stephen Alicaro.
Action Project. Thank you and have a good night.
Thank you.
Oh, wait a second. Where is she now? I got to give her a call. She's kind of cute. USA. Last question. You see this con? Is that like kind of helping conservatives in this thing? I don't know.
Hello. Test.
At the end of the day, this was all a nice show. Now go back to your families, to your communities. Find out what you can do to help locally. Volunteer some of your time. Or start a business on the side. And do something. You know, get people to help you. I really believe that someone that builds a business and someone that builds technology or anything that can help people around in their community and others does a lot more good for the world than any of this political stuff. Because at the end of the day, the technology we use, including this thing here, and everything you're dealing with on a daily basis, has been invented by scientists, technologists, businessmen, and everyone finds their own way to use it. The vast majority of people use it to help others and to help themselves and use it for their to good ends. So I encourage you to go out there and make a difference and don't just wait for politicians to do it for you. Thank you very much, and I hope you liked this video. And I really think that if you had 3 hours to watch it, then you're going to have 3 hours to make a difference in the world. Thank you.
Hello. Hey, you guys, we have a comedy show coming up right now, actually, so we're hoping that everybody can just keep it, taking their seats.
No, go do something with your life. See ya.